morning, everyone. Beautiful morning this morning. We got an exciting agenda today, but first we want to welcome our new commissioner, Barry Orsland. He was confirmed last week. And he's hit the ground running since last week. Confirmation was confirmed last Thursday, and we've filled up his time pretty quickly. We had our budget workshop yesterday that was very informative, and we had a long meeting through the day, but looking forward to this agenda today with feral hogs, black bear, and we've got Andy, and I think there you are, indoors. And we'll be listening a few little regs on ducks. So appreciate everyone's being here, and we planted a tree yesterday. Justine gave a little history on Arbor Day, and so we've had a great couple days and appreciate everybody's work. And Jennifer this morning ran with our newest group of recruits. So how did it go? And Randy? So thanks, guys, and I'm going to turn it over to Sarah.
All right, good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Commission and folks from the field. We're delighted to have everybody here, and I just have to say happy spring turkey season to everyone. It's almost here. So just a few slides in the way of updates, and then I'm going to have Kendra Whithouse, who is our new addition to the MDC family, as Assistant Director for Operational Excellence. She's going to share a few update slides, and then I'll come back and finish it up. I think I messed things up. Sorry. Can I just do that?
Click out of the menu.
Can I?
No, click on the slide.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
there you go.
Now do that. Let's do that. What am I doing wrong? There we go. Okay, I think we're on it. So just because we have wrapped up winter operations, it's a good time to remind the Commission just how much hard work staff have put into the targeted culling efforts over the last several months. A total of 2,240 deer were removed during the department's winter culling efforts, with 12 CWD positive deer confirmed throughout these efforts to date. There have been a total of 41 CWD positive deer reported since last July of 2018. Again, just a huge thank you to many staff across the agency for their time and dedication to this important work. It's very difficult work, often in not the best weather conditions, but these are difficult decisions when we're dealing with a fatal disease on the landscape, and the decisions would be even more difficult without the data that we collect during these winter operations. So we're very appreciative of staff and their work.
And did you say deer you
Cold winter operations, so basic targeted harvesting of deer in CWD positive areas.
And were there, how many deer were positive?
12 positives. 12 positive in just from the winter culling operations alone. A bit of a flood update. Commission is well aware that the Missouri and Mississippi River flooding has impacted several of our conservation areas and our boat accesses in recent weeks, causing us to close several conservation areas and boat accesses in the state's northwest region, though there's been flooding in other parts of the state as well. Some areas were underwater, others were inaccessible due to public safety issues. A special thank you to staff involved in emergency operations and assisting citizens in levee districts also. And as floodwaters begin to recede, staff will conduct damage assessments on those areas impacted. So we have to also give a big shout out to the 2019 trout opener. Rain and cooler temperatures didn't keep anglers away from participating in this year's trout opener. Trout tags sold on opening day of the 2019 season, they totaled 7,917 tags. We do think the weather may have played a role in total trout tag sales for the entire month, as our March sales were down. In total, 53,769 trout tags were sold in March, down approximately 6% from 2018. Wanted to thank Commissioner Bradford, who joined Governor Parson at opening day at Bennett Springs State Park. So, the Missouri National Archery in the Schools program state tournament. I'm telling you, this thing continues to grow and grow and grow. In March, we saw 3,360 youth participants in the Bullseye and 3D events at the state tournament in Branson. Our own Jennifer Batson Warren joined other staff there, many other staff. Why, you were there. You were there. There you go. Okay. Joined many other staff in hosting this amazing tournament. We do appreciate the Conservation Heritage Foundation for hosting the tournament, but it continues to be a huge draw. In addition to parents, I think we're over 8,000 in attendance at that tournament. Some may recognize this big smile. It looks a lot like Mr. Jeffrey's smile. Youth turkey hunters harvested 2,540 turkeys during spring youth season last weekend. Top harvest counties were Franklin with 61 turkeys harvested, Laclede with 56, and Texas County with 52. Warm weather and sunny skies helped increase this year's youth weekend harvest over last year's, where young hunters checked in 1,729 turkeys. I am incredibly hopeful that a few were left behind for the rest of us on opening day. And I hope those who plan to be in the turkey woods opening day will remain safe. Important time of year. So I'm going to have Kendra Whithouse, again, a new addition to the MDC family, joining us to take over operational excellence efforts, give just a few updates on what she's up to.
How do I advance this thing?
It's right here.
All right.
Sorry, it took me so long.
No, that's all right. Good morning, and thank you for allowing me to speak to you this morning. I'm excited to be here. I'm about 7 weeks in to my journey here at the department. So just a little bit about myself. So I come with 25 years of healthcare industry experience, ranging from project management, clinical operations, performance improvement, process improvement. I have spent significant time applying and using the Malcolm Baldrige National Award Criteria Standards. I'm an examiner, have been for the past 5 years, and deeply involved in that process, and hope to move that forward here on our journey at MDC, and we'll talk just a little bit more about that, but excited to be here. And so I thought I would take this morning just to kind of provide you a little bit of an update about operational excellence and kind of where I would like to see this focus go. So. Operational excellence. So when I was interviewed, they asked me to define operational excellence, and I guess I did okay because they hired me, right? So, but really, operational excellence, I see it as how can we move an organization forward to develop a culture of continuous learning and improvement, right? So how do we combine best practices into a system where each piece work together and create a high-functioning organization? And so it's set in motion by various things. It's set in motion by having clear strategic direction and objectives, by establishing clear measures and clear accountabilities, by creating goals, plans, and budgets, by tracking performance, and then, having robust conversations around that, like what do we need to do to get better? How do we get better faster? And then ultimately, how do we hold one another accountable? And then what are the rewards and consequences associated with that? And so that package together helps kind of set the stage for how we should view operational excellence. And in our organization, I kind of see it to be in 6 elements or 6 blocks. The first one is the statewide operational excellence, and so I'm having the privilege of being involved in this statewide effort where all of the state departments are basically coming together to really leverage the resources, best practice sharing, so that we can build greater capabilities within our organization and across the state to do process improvement and to be more efficient in how we deliver deliver to the citizens of Missouri. And so having the opportunity to be involved in that is important. We meet about once a month currently, and it's kind of in its infancy stages. The second portion of operational excellence that I see is really the lean and the process improvement stages of it. So I'm sure lean is not a new terminology. It's certainly not a new terminology to the department here, but really it's about how do we use a set of principles and methods to look at the wastes and defects that we have in our organization, and how do we provide more value to our customers? How do we provide more value inside the work environment? And then how do we use that to really engage, that process to engage people at the front line? The people who do the work know the work best, right? And so it's really a process for us to engage them, gauge their knowledge, and really make improvements. And so that in itself is just a philosophy that I'm very enthusiastic about in terms of what the department is doing with that. But in order to be able to do that, to be able to bring forward lean and process improvement, we have to be able to have training and facilitation. So the department has done a great job leading up to my being here in providing training. So there's currently right now we have 3 levels of training that we provide. So there's a white belt, a yellow belt, and a green belt. And basically there are various forms of tools that are educated. So the goal is 100% of employees would get white belt training. We have about, I think, 85 or so individuals that have been yellow belt trained. We have about 20 that have been green belt trained, 5 in process, and another 9 that's in a new class that started this year that we're providing here on site. And so what does that mean? What that means is we're equipping our staff to be able to go out and do process improvement events and help facilitate those. Facilitation is also very important. So currently right now there's myself and 1 other part-time employee that is full-time to these efforts, and so we're unable to do that alone, right? So we need folks that can facilitate projects and help deploy this out to across the state. And so just an example of that this week alone, someone that was trained in facilitation went out, I think they were here in Jefferson City, a group of them met to map out the foul draw process. And so knowing that there's a lot of inconsistencies, there's a lot of wasted time in that process and the amount of time that it takes to of staff time to be at each of the draw stations through every single day of the season. And really by them mapping that process out and looking for solutions through lean process improvement, they learned just alone by applying a scanning system that they could save as much as 1,300 hours of manual labor time in that 60-day period of time. So that's an example of where we can use trained facilitators to do more work faster, right, to get to some end results that we want. So another key element is strategic planning, outcome-based, measurable. So it's important, obviously, for us to have a strong strategic plan, but with that also comes how do we set milestones for our teams? How do we set goals? How do we set measures of success? And then to be able to track those. And so some of the work that I'm working towards is to being able to have a consistent mechanism to do that so that everyone is clear about what the responsibility is, to help the teams develop measurable, reasonable outcomes so that we can track our progress, and then to be able to have those accountabilities surrounding that. And so trying to standardize that through the system is one of my goals. Major projects is another one. We have lots of major projects. I certainly, whenever I arrived here, started running full force. But just as an example of a key project, this week and previously, almost literally my first week of work, I had the opportunity to work with the Area Maintenance and Infrastructure Group. What a great group. Jacob leads that group. Jacob and Bill lead that group, and they do an amazing job. And so just as an example, what we learned through that process is there's not an adequate framework to allow the frontline workers to determine how much maintenance needs to be done on any given area across the state of Missouri. And so by us defining and using a systematic approach to how we define that criteria, it helps them to be able to to know how much area maintenance to do, and then we can apply that across the state, because currently what we find is our practices are very inconsistent. And so for us to improve and not be wasteful, we need to be doing it the same way. And so this team is really working towards providing a systematic way to determine how much area maintenance is needed on the areas. And so that work continues. It's a great group. Infrastructure is another one that they're also looking at. So lots of major projects going on across the state. And then last but not least, I wanted to touch on Malcolm Baldrige. And I don't know how much knowledge that you may or may not have about Malcolm Baldrige, but back in the 1980s, it was recognized the need for a set of standards of organizational excellence so that we could compete in the economy, right? So in 1987, Ronald Reagan actually signed the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Improvement Act, which allowed a framework to be set for organizations to improve and get sustainable results. And so through my experience in the healthcare industry, I'm very passionate and believe fully that this is a framework that we could adopt in our organization to help excel our efforts towards process improvement and gaining efficiencies and becoming a high-performing organization. And so, not to belabor it, but just to give you a little bit of a high-level view about what this design looks like. So there's, on the left-hand side, you can see that there's leadership, strategy, and customers. And really what that is that's the leadership triad. And so it really emphasizes how leadership focus on strategy and customers will help drive the right-hand side, which is results, workforce, and operations. And so it's very important for us to have systematic approaches. We have to be able to ensure that we are deploying and learning and integrating our work. And so as an example, if we think about the area maintenance design, so we have identified that there's inconsistencies in that, and by using the operations side of the organizational framework here, we can define what the systematic approach is to area maintenance. Now, that's only one part of it, right? So once we define this, then we have to make sure that we're going to do it consistently across the state of Missouri. And sometimes deploying things can be the toughest thing to be done, right? So how do we ensure that across the state of Missouri, we are able to deploy this and that everyone is going to do it the same? So that's a challenge, and this concept helps us with that. And then we have to step back and say, okay, well, what did we learn from this? And did we get it right? Do we need to step back and say, oh, we made some decisions, but maybe we need to tweak that a little bit? It's that process of continual learning. And then how do we integrate that? And how do we make sure that that this plan that we've set in motion is customer focused, that it meets the strategic plan, and that our workforce can get in alignment with, and how do those pieces work together? And so that's an example of how the Malcolm Baldrige Excellence Framework can help us look at our processes, make sure they're systematic, make sure that there's learning around it, make sure that we're deploying it out across the state of Missouri consistently so that we can be better tomorrow than what we are today. And so one of the things that I shared with Sarah and Jennifer whenever I was in the process of being hired was my passion for this. And so I'm hoping to bring this forward and use this as a framework for our excellence here at the conservation. Thank you. Do y'all have any questions?
Thank you,
Yes.
Kendra.
So
Commissioners?
was the department involved in this process before you?
No, I would say, I don't know. I can't answer that.
Certainly, operational excellence, we initiated a couple of years ago. What Kendra brings is really this background in Malcolm Baldrige. That had been a desire, I think, of ours. We had launched operational excellence, we had launched the lean training and other projects. But what really she is bringing in addition to her experience in all those other areas is this experience with the Malcolm Baldrige effort and process.
Well, I can't applaud enough the fact that you're doing this. This is a big deal. And, you can look at the best run, most successful companies in the country, they're doing this. They've done this. And in manufacturing, our customers insist that we do that, or they're not going to do business with us. I mean, it's gotten to that point, so it's a big deal.
Comments? Other comments? Kendra, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Just a few remaining slides for the commission, and just, of course, a mention, preparing for wildfire season here. We know that warm winds and dry weather can set the stage for wildfire season, something our staff pay very close attention to here at the department, and we are, of course, responsible for wildfire suppression on all state and privately owned lands in Missouri. Of course, we work cooperatively with our rural fire districts to make these suppression efforts happen. In calendar year 2018, there were 1,931 wildfires reported to us for a total acreage of 21,359 acres consumed by wildfire. The 2019 spring has been wetter than previous years. We're grateful for that, and we're expecting lower than average fire occurrence numbers. So far, we've had 207 wildfires reported to us for a total of 3,518 acres. I need to mention, mostly Commissioner Orscheln, to you, that we also assist with out-of-state wildfire efforts, helping others in a time of need. Last year alone, 52 MDC staff, really in 6 different interagency or interstate efforts, we work cooperatively with the state of Iowa, mobilized for out-of-state fire suppression efforts in Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, and Utah. And of course, we had folks there at the infamous car fire in California as well. So important that our folks get very good training there, but also helping others out in a time of need. Missouri Conservation Hall of Fame Award on April 25th in conjunction with the annual Ladd Foundation Barbecue down in Salem. Always a good time. We'll hold an induction ceremony at the Pioneer Forest for Mr. Clinton, known as Clint Trammell, into the Missouri Conservation Hall of Fame. His 35-year career at the 150,000-acre privately owned Pioneer Forest, Mr. Trammell was known for his superb management and further development of the techniques, science, and art of uneven age forest management at a time when professional foresters and forestry institutions, industrial and other private forests, had shifted almost entirely to even-aged forestry methods. We also look forward to recognizing Dr. Grant Woods for recognition as a Master Conservationist next month when we go to the Commission meeting in Southwest Missouri. I have to mention that we had a number of staff here, also in Kansas City, Claudine Lamb out of the Kansas City region, that were involved in the National Minorities in Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Related Sciences, also known as MANNERS, conference held last weekend in Overland Park, Kansas. And I had the opportunity to participate on a panel during that conference, sharing thoughts on the use of power and privilege in the workplace. I have to tell you, nearly 1,000 minority students from across the country attended that conference, and I was incredibly impressed with this next generation. It did my heart good. They were ranging in age from high school to those enrolled in graduate school, all with an interest in agriculture and natural resources, and I tried to do a little recruiting while I was there, but a very impressive conference and very heartening to see these young professionals coming up with an interest in our area. So, finally, Commissioners, I'd like to take a moment to recognize a member of our family that is no longer with us, Rawls County Conservation Agent Chris Cox, who lost his battle with cancer in early March. Chris began his career with MDC in July of 1986 as a fisheries assistant at the Honeywell Hatchery before his selection into the 1996 Conservation Agent Training Class. Upon graduation, Chris was assigned to Shannon County, where he served for 3 years before transferring to Rawls County in northeast Missouri, where he served the remainder of his career. Chris was a beloved member of the MDC family and an exceptional law enforcement professional. I know that it's been very difficult for the entire protection family, the entire MDC family, particularly in the Northeast region, and so our prayers and thoughts are with our protection family and with the Cox family as well. With that, Madam Chair, unless there are questions by the Commission, I conclude my report.
Thank you, Sarah. Commissioners, comments, questions?
No question.
Thank you. Very informative, and appreciate Kendra's briefing this morning as well. Our next item on the agenda is approval, or action item on our consent calendar, and unless any commissioner request an item to be removed from that, we will entertain a motion to approve that.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. On to the next. Mike, regulations.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners, Director Powell.
Morning.
Since my last report, the Regulations Committee met on March 14th of 2019 to consider recommendations to establish regulations for the 2019-2020 migratory bird hunting seasons, which will be presented to the Commission for Commission consideration today. The committee met again on April 4th. Recommendations from that meeting, which include deer season limits, expansion of the Deer Management Assistance Program pilot to include 3 central Missouri counties, rule changes associated with the department's permit restructuring efforts, and proposals pertaining to transportation and disposal of deer carcasses will be brought forward for commission consideration during your meeting in May. Commissioners, before I begin my formal report, recall that in December, you voted to approve a recommendation for wildlife code changes pertaining to fencing standards for facilities holding captive servants. Following that initial vote, the proposed amendment to 3 CSR 10-9.220 wildlife confinement standards was filed with the Secretary of State's office for publication in the Missouri Register, which this filing initiated a formal 30-day public comment period. While the department received no public input on the proposed changes to this rule during the formal comment period, staff noted that a date listed in paragraph 3, subparagraph B1 of the proposed amendment was incorrect and have made that correction in the order of rulemaking provided for your consideration today. This presentation of an order of rulemaking as a formal commission action item signifies the final step in the department's regulation process. As you know, the commission has the authority to adopt as originally written, amend, or withdraw the proposed changes. If approved today, the anticipated effective date of these changes will be June 30th of 2019. Madam Chair, I request commission approval of the order of rulemaking with the change I just noted as shown on page 7 of your packet.
We have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
On March 14th, the committee heard from Mr. Clinton Helm, McDonald County, regarding his desire to use thermal optic equipment to take predators on his property, and from Mr. Alan Morris of Jackson regarding feral hog numbers in his area and his concerns about the effectiveness of Missouri's eradication efforts. I thank Mr. Helm and Morris for taking the time to meet with the committee to share their suggestions and promise to keep them informed as progress is made. Commissioners, as you know, the department's schedule for setting migratory bird hunting regulations is governed by a timeline established by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Changes to that timeline implemented in 2016 allow the department to better serve our citizens by announcing waterfowl regulations much earlier than in previous years. Madam Chair, Resource Scientist Dr. Andy Radicke will now provide an overview of recommendations for the 2019-2020 migratory bird seasons, including information on mourning doves. I'd like to also note that this is the 3rd year that season dates and zone boundary formulas approved by the Commission in 2016 will be implemented. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Radicke.
Morning, Andy. Doreen as well.
Good morning, Director and Commissioners, Madam Chair. I am going to try not destroying things up here. There we go. And I will try not be distracted by turkey season looking at one commissioner this morning. Yep, exactly. And I encourage you when you're turkey hunting, watch in the trees to see those wood ducks exploring for nesting sites. So there's my segue. Yes, and I really do appreciate the opportunity to share our recommendations for migratory birds and waterfowl. Before doing so, Madam Chair already has mentioned the role that Doreen Mingles plays in assisting, and we work as a team throughout the year in developing these recommendations. Tom Thompson is not here today, but he is the person that puts forward the mourning dove recommendations. And in addition, I really would like to thank several folks in divisions in the department. Wildlife in particular, the wetland managers do an incredible job of monitoring waterfowl numbers throughout the season, tracking participation on the areas. Protection Division participates in a survey we do once a year. It's a national survey, the Midwinter Survey. They do a waterfowl and eagle count in every county in the state, so it's a pretty incredible effort. And then also thank O&E for all the work they do in helping communicate the hunting activity and regulations. And so with that, I'll go on with what I'd like to cover today. And so first, to provide a little bit more background on that regulation schedule that Dr. Hubbard mentioned in dealing with the federal regulations and how our process fits in with that, then talk a little bit about the webless migratory bird recommendations, then move into the ducks and waterfowl. So looking at our regulations, we really fit in within the federal framework. And so the federal framework, working with Fish and Wildlife Service through the flyways, establishes the season lengths, bag limits, and the earliest seasons can open and the latest they can close. We can be more conservative than the federal frameworks allow, but we cannot be more liberal. And again, this process is a year-long process. There's 5 different kind of steps at the federal level. Each step culminates in a publication in the Federal Register, and that kind of guides what we do and the timing of what we do. And so you can see the proposed dates of what the Fish and Wildlife targets to have those documents published in the Federal Register. This year, you can see that we are way behind schedule at the federal level, and a lot of this was due to the government shutdown. And so we were supposed to have the proposed season frameworks published at the federal level on December 10th. Those still haven't come out, and so everything else has been delayed. And so where this gets to be a little bit of an issue is we as a state are required to submit our selections by April 30th. And ideally, we would like to know what the federal frameworks are before we do that. And this year, that's not going to happen. The Fish and Wildlife Service is recommending to go on what they're proposing and recognizing it's less than an ideal situation. And so that's what we propose to do, is to still meet our obligation of hitting that our April 30th deadline.
Do those dates change much from year to year?
No, it's pretty much consistent. Now, and I will say that this new process that Dr. Hubbard mentioned has only been in place for a couple of years, and the Fish and Wildlife Service, for whatever reason, has really struggled to meet those deadlines, and that's something that we continue to work through the Flyway Council. And should note that Jason Sumners is now the chair of the Mississippi Flyway Council, and so he'll be leading that effort with our council and trying to figure out how to deal with some of those issues.
So if worse comes to worse, you can use last year's date.
Yeah. Well, let's not jinx it. So hopefully it's, yeah. That would be worse. Yes, that would. Right. And so then turning our attention to the webless migratory birds, including doves, it's really the same as last year. Nothing has changed. And so on September 1st, we propose opening the dove, rail, and snipe seasons. The dove season would go to November 29th, rails to November 9th, snipe through the 16th. The rail bag limit is an aggregate bag limit, Virginia and sorrel rail. The woodcock season would start in mid-October on the 15th and go to the 28th. And then for all the coot hunters, that will be the same as duck season. Right. So now turning our attention to ducks, we'd really like to just take a look back a little bit of what happened last year and then talk about the status that will inform our recommendations and then describe what our recommendations are. And so as you can imagine, I hear a lot from hunters what the season was like, and some of you maybe have heard what the season was like this past year. But a friend sent a slide that I thought really summed up the duck season for this year. It was kind of a snoozer. It was tough. And so looking at it, and what really is interesting, this year we actually had record numbers of duck use days. But despite the high numbers of ducks in Missouri, our harvest was really low. We don't have the statewide harvest, but what we do have is the harvest on our areas that typically accounts for about 15% of the state harvest. And you can see it was significantly lower than past years. On our areas, we harvested about 67,000 ducks. The number of trips was about standard, about 45,000 trips. So that also just highlights the incredible use of those 15 areas. If you look at the harvest per hunter on a daily basis, you can see that was even lower. So the hunters were out there giving it their best, but each day it was a struggle. And so, you know, a bird and a half average this year. And so I want to look a little bit why that might have been the case. And so, you know, we need to really look first at what happened to the north of us, and there was a couple things. They actually had record cold in early October, and so this was October 11th in Saskatchewan. When you move further south into the U.S., there was incredible habitat because of the flooding that occurred even this fall and along the Missouri River, northern Iowa, so great habitat. You get into Missouri, wheat in some areas had flooding that really had a negative impact on several areas. And then the weather during the season was really dramatic. Many of you remember the blizzard of November 25th, you know, 50-mile-an-hour winds, snow, cold in some areas. But we had periods of ice and cold, and then it seemed like when it would start to be mild, there was periods of full moon when ducks already have a propensity to feed at night. It just accentuated that. So it was really resulted in tough hunting conditions. But perhaps the biggest thing that we didn't anticipate was the impacts of poor productivity. Much of the prairie pothole region this year had poor conditions, low numbers of wetlands. And I want to show you what that translates into in terms of productivity and how that impacts us. So one of the things that Missouri participates with other states in the flyway is collecting wings, where we can look at the age of birds to know the proportion of young birds in the population to adult birds in the population. And so what I'm going to do is highlight the 3 worst seasons over the last several years and the 3 best seasons and look at what that ratio looks like. So you can look at the 3 worst seasons since 2001, and you can see that really about only 1 young bird was harvested for every adult bird, and that trend held this past year. And you compare that to the 3 best years, and you almost have 2 young birds being harvested to every 1 adult bird. And you might say, well, why does that make a difference? Well, those adult birds, they've experienced the game the season before, so they figure out they need to feed at night, they need to spend more time on the refuges, and they're just more difficult to hunt. So now turning our attention to the status last year that informed our regulation recommendations for this year. The last couple of years we have seen a little bit of a drying of the prairies. In the U.S., the conditions were about the same as last year, but we're kind of back to the long-term average. In Canada, the amount of wetlands declined by about 15%, so it again is moving back towards that long-term average. And then the total was down about 14% from the long-term, or from last year, but is again about at the long-term average. That obviously affects duck populations. Duck numbers were down about 14% from last year. The amazing thing is we're still 17% above the long-term average. So we've just had phenomenal duck numbers for the last several years. Now looking at individual species, I'm going to show a graph that will show you what the duck populations compared to 2017 and the long-term average. So mallards, for example, last year they were still 17% above the long-term average, but were 12% below 2017. So if you look at kind of the most commonly harvested species, you'll see most are at or above the long-term average with a couple exceptions. The most notable are pintail and scaup, and you can see pintail were down significantly from last year and 40% below the long-term average, and scaup also were a little bit lower than the long-term average. So that's the information we use to set the season dates and bag limits. Now I want to talk a little bit about the federal frameworks. Looking at teal season, depending on the populations, we have three options: a closed season, a 9-day season, and a 16-day season. If you look at last year's population estimate of 7.9 million, we're well above the threshold that would keep us in that 16-day season. So the 16-day season has to occur between September 1st and the 30th, the end of the month, and we can have a bag limit of 6 teal, a daily bag limit. So what we're recommending is opening the teal season the first Saturday after Labor Day, which we've done for the last several years. What this does is it prevents us from opening on Labor Day, where you've got a lot of other recreational activities going on. And really that teal migration, anywhere from mid to late August through early October, teal are moving through Missouri. And so we tend to hit, most of the migration with those dates. And so with that, we'd be looking at a teal season that would open on September 7th and run through September 22nd. Now, I've mentioned the federal frameworks and the really nice working relationships between the flyways and the Fish and Wildlife in setting those recommendations. This last year, we were hit with a little bit of a curveball. A representative from Mississippi introduced a bill to have the season frameworks change the closing dates from the last Sunday in January to January 31st. And also a provision to have a special 2-day season open for military and veterans. And so those two things were new that didn't come through the normal process, but came through the legislative branch. And so what are the implications? These show you the opening and closing dates of what they once were. And we really don't know how that new bill will translate into closing dates for moderate and restrictive seasons, but we do know for the liberal seasons, the opening framework dates will be unchanged, but the closing framework dates would be January 31st. Shifting then to the season dates and bag limits, we use a process that's called adaptive management. What it does is model some of the key things that we're uncertain about, so we can use data to monitor what those things, how they track over time, and as we learn more, we can adapt what our regulation practices go. So it fits very much in line with the operational excellence we talk about, but applying it to the biological side. So looking at it, the two things that really drive that package is the number of May ponds in Prairie Canada, as well as the size of the mallard population. Depending on that, we can have a closed season in red, the restrictive season in yellow, the moderate season in gray, or a liberal season. So looking at it this year, with 3.7 million Canadian ponds and 9.6 million mallards, we're well into the liberal part of that matrix. Now, one thing to keep in mind, I mentioned there's a 60, 45, and 30-day season. Look at how few cells are populated by that moderate season. So in the event that we have to restrict, it's more than likely we'll go from a 60-day season to a 30-day season. What makes that even more dramatic, this is the 23rd year where we've had 60-day seasons in a row. So I'm guessing most hunters are completely oblivious that this possibility is out there. So with the bag limits, basically everything remains unchanged from last year with the exception of pintail. I noted earlier that their numbers are 40% below the long-term average. If you look at last year, their numbers are a little bit lower than they were before. The other key thing with pintail is where they settle. If the conditions are good in the Prairie Canada, they settle further south and they're generally more productive. If conditions are poorer in those southerly locations, they end up flying further north, tend to nest in less productive habitats, and just don't produce as many young. Now turning to the state side of things, as Dr. Hubbard noted, we've been operating under formulas and zones approved a few years ago, and those season date formulas are to open the north zone on the first Saturday in November, in the middle zone to open on the Saturday nearest November 6th, run for 7 days, close for 5 days, and then reopen for the remaining 53 days. In the South Zone, the formula is to open for the Thanksgiving holiday weekend, those 4 days, to close for however long is needed to open as long as the federal framework allowed. So, as I noted before, the formulas or the framework has changed, and so our formulas are now a little bit out of sync. We've said as late as the federal framework allows, and the last Sunday in January, those two things are no longer the same. And so we're making the recommendation to tweak our formulas to have it state to run through January 31st. And just given the uncertainty for the moderate and restrictive season, what we're recommending right now is just to remove that parenthetical as late as the federal framework allows. The rest of the formula would stay the same. Looking at the implications for the South Zone, you'll see this year it would result in a season that's a little bit later than it would have been otherwise. Next year it'll actually be the same because the last Sunday in January will put us at January 31st. So just as a reminder for the season date formulas, I'm sure you all at times get recommendations, why don't we change the season date next year, every year? And there's some good reasons to kind of have this formula. One, it really allows hunters to start planning ahead. If you start establishing traditions, that's really helpful. It really gives us a better idea on evaluating over a range of conditions how hunters are responding to it. Each year is dramatically different in what hunters experience. And then the other thing this formula does, it really provides a compromise for hunters that want earlier season dates or later season dates. And I'll get to that for the middle zone this year in particular. So with those formulas and the proposed adjustment to the South Zone formula, we'd be recommending a season dates in the North Zone that would open on November 2nd, run through the end of December. In the Middle Zone, with that formula being November 6th, it's going to shift the Middle Zone opener to the latest it's ever been on November 9th, and then closing the day before deer season, firearm season opens on the 15th, and then reopening on the 21st and running through January 12th. And when we start talking about compromise, this is where it really holds true, especially in southeast Missouri. There's always been debate about, do our zones really work? They haven't traditionally wanted dates as late as the South Zone, but our middle zone dates aren't quite late enough. This season date is kind of a middle ground this year, and so it'll be really interesting to see how hunters respond to that. And then the South Zone, like I mentioned before, would be opening on Thanksgiving on the 28th for those 4 days, and then reopening on December 7th and going as late as the new federal framework allows. Then turning our attention to the youth season, we typically offer those 2 season days before the regular season opens. In recent years, depending on the North and Middle Zone, it sometimes can conflict with the early youth deer firearm season, and so we've kind of worked to accommodate that. So this year, that would mean holding the youth season the weekend before in the North Zone and 2 weeks before in the Middle Zone. And that way, hunters, families won't have to make a decision of hunting, introducing their youth to deer hunting versus waterfowl. They can do both. And so those dates would be October 26th and 7th in the North and Middle Zone, and then November 23rd and 24th in the South Zone. So now, finally, turning our attention to the goose recommendations, I'll look a little bit at the status of the major goose populations, starting with Canada geese. Interior Canada geese are the populations that nest right along the coast of Hudson Bay. In Missouri, the eastern prairie population is the subpopulation of this that really migrates into Missouri. Were traditionally found at Swan Lake years before, not so much anymore. But their population is basically similar to last year. Their production was a little low. There was a late spring. But their population has generally been trending fairly stable, which is great. Now, if you look at the temperate nesting Canada geese, these are geese that nest in southern Manitoba, Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri. If you look at the Mississippi Flyway as a whole, you can see there are a lot of temperate nesting Canada geese, provide a lot of hunting opportunity. Their numbers have been relatively stable the last several years. But now if you look in Missouri, our population is relatively low, just about 52,000. And that number has been fairly stable over the last several years. So we always try to keep in mind how to not over-harvest our population, but take advantage of the great opportunities provided by the populations from further north. Looking at the white-fronted goose population, their numbers have been fairly stable the last several years. We do a fall survey and had numbers at about 750,000. Should be noted, the last couple of years, we've seen a substantial increase of white-fronted geese migrating through Missouri, so it's really created a new source of opportunity for many hunters in Missouri. The snow geese, their populations have, for several years, have been really high. If you look the last several years, you can see it appears there's a little bit of a decline. And this is less because of the increased hunting pressure on them during the conservation order, but they've had the last 4 years really some late springs and almost zero production. And we're starting to see with climate change some mismatch of when they're hatching and when the food sources that they need are available. So there's some real changes occurring on the tundra and the Arctic where they nest. Now turning our attention to the frameworks for Canada geese, we can offer 107 days and open as early as September 1st, go through February 15th. We could potentially offer a 5-bird bag limit in September and then a 3-bird bag limit thereafter. The white-fronted goose season, the framework is we could either have an 88 season with a 2-bird bag limit or a 74-day season with a 3-bird bag limit. So when you take all those together, what we propose is a 9-day early Canada goose season beginning that first weekend of October. The reason we don't do it in September is there's a molt migration. The young birds in Missouri, actually the first year or two migrate north over the summer. Many people don't know that. And they come back into Missouri in late September, early October. So by having that season in October, we're waiting till those birds arrive back into Missouri, so there's that hunting opportunity. And then by having that 88-day season that opens on Veterans Day and goes through February 6th, that really provides an opportunity to really consolidate all the seasons to be open at the same time. And then we propose that 2-bird bag limit for white fronts, so we can have that full complement of 88 days, the 3 Canada geese and 20 light geese. And this is a little bit conservative on the Canada geese, but remember that smaller population we have in Missouri, that's why we do that. So the rationale for this recommendation is it really simplifies regulations. You just basically have an early Canada goose season and then a regular goose season. It provides opportunity for concurrent hunting when they can hunt both ducks and geese, and then it maximizes that late hunting opportunity. We just, a couple of years ago, shifted that date to that first week in February. It's been really popular, and we haven't heard many complaints from the conservation order hunters because they can't hunt through the conservation order till all these regular seasons are closed. So with that, with the goose season recommendations, that would be to open on that first Saturday in October, the 5th, and run through the 13th, then have the regular goose season open from Veterans Day, the 11th, through the 6th of February. And then the conservation order, all the hunting seasons must be closed, and so that would have the season being open from February 7th through April 30th. And there the shooting hours change where they can hunt even a half hour after sunset. So last but not least is the falconry seasons, and consider that. Basically their seasons, they have to count the days where all the other gun seasons are open, and then they have the remaining days, the extended season that would go from February 11th through March 10th. And that's based on conversation with falconers early. They like that late hunting opportunity, and so that's why we have it open then. And then their bag limit is, daily bag limit's 3, and that's in aggregate with doves as well. So now let's just look ahead what we might expect. Looking at conditions on the prairie, in the Dakotas, it's looking like it'll be great. They've had lots of rain and snow. Up north in the Canada, you can see it's a little bit drier. I just received an email from a farmer kind of in that bullseye where it says SL in Saskatchewan. He commented he went ice fishing on March 20th with the power auger with the extension. He still barely could get through the 5 feet of ice that he had, and he said even since then they've only had 2 days where it's reached 40 degrees. The rest have been right around freezing, And it's been very dry, so in that area, he was saying there's going to be very little runoff, and so the conditions there won't be that great. If you look in Missouri, we do have some uncertainty. The director mentioned the flooding, and so while the flooding is important and really is beneficial in many ways to wetlands, we're uncertain what the damages might be and how that might affect some of the opportunity on some of our managed areas. And we also have some construction projects on some areas that might affect hunting opportunity. In regards to the construction projects, I would really like to highlight one of the things that has changed dramatically is the philosophy on how to restore wetlands. And so now the designs that the department's done for restoring and renovating these wetlands is much more to work with system processes as opposed to against system processes. So hopefully we won't see the types of damage to infrastructure that we've experienced from some of these older areas that still rely on infrastructure that was really meant to kind of work against nature rather than with it. The other thing it's hard to believe, but it's right here and around the corner, is to consider the options for our 5-year open season to consider changes for zone boundaries and season structure. So every 5 years, we can consider the number of zones, whether or not we have split seasons, and whatever we choose has to stay in place for 5 years. And so this year, coming up in May 1st, 2020, we'll have to make our recommendations. We traditionally piggybacked our season date formulas at that same time. It's worked really well to do so, and hopefully we can do that again. So if we take that approach, what we're proposing is to do a survey this fall to get hunter input on what they might prefer for season date preferences, use that information and then hold public meetings. They're really workshops where we have hunters get together in small groups and actually in small groups come up with recommendations and share their small group recommendations with the other small groups. It's a really educational process for them as well for us. Take that information then hopefully in April, bring forward recommendations to the Regulations Committee and the Commission, and then meet that deadline of May 1st for submitting our selections for that next 5 years to the Fish and Wildlife Service. So those are our recommendations. Just to summarize, so for the migratory birds other than waterfowl, basically keeping things status quo, the same as last year. For the special teal season, status quo, just a little calendar change by dates. The waterfowl zones, those would be unchanged. The duck season date formulas would be unchanged except for that little change in the south zone. The waterfowl, coot and zone season dates and bag limits would be similar to last year with the exception of pintail bag limit would change. The youth season dates in the north zone would just be a week later because it works out better that way this year, and otherwise the same. The one that I haven't mentioned, but earlier on we mentioned there was the opportunity where we could provide 2 days for veterans and military. Discussions with the Regulations Committee. The challenge there is there's a number of groups that could make compelling cases to have special seasons, whether it's first responders, the law enforcement community, others, and so rather than going down that route at this point, we recommended not having that season. And should note, with waterfowl, you have a 60-day season compared to a much shorter turkey season or deer season. And so this is something we can reevaluate in future years, but for this year, we're recommending not offering that. And so with that, I'll turn it back to Dr. Hubbard.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Questions for Dr. Redford before we?
Nice job.
Thank you.
Andy, it's news to me that our Congress has decided to get in the business of regulating waterfowl seasons. Is there any indication that this is a first step towards some other set of parameters that can further kind of tie your hands about what you recommend to us?
That's a really great question. I certainly hope not. This happened one other time in the mid-1990s. Having said that, I would not be surprised if that doesn't happen. There's a few southern states that want the season dates to be even later, and they kind of back off to this date, but 5 years from now, I wouldn't be surprised if we're back.
Certainly recognize that every state would like to have the regulations centered around their own interests, but it's one of the great traditions of North American waterfowling that we discuss it as a flyway, that we work collectively on these and overlook the interests of individual states. So it's a concern.
It is, it really is, and you're absolutely right. The management of waterfowl in a collaborative way between state and federal agencies it's incredible, and it has a rich tradition, and it's been very successful, and has been a leader in wildlife management, of thinking about large-scale wildlife management issues, so I share your concern.
Commission, I would just add, too, that this has been a concern for many states, as you can imagine, and the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies had multiple rounds of phone calls. Dr. Hubbard, Andy, I know we're probably Jason as well, on a number of those calls to offer recommendations for amendments to that legislation. It started in a much worse condition, if you can imagine that, and so I think just the fact that at least some of these things ended up in a voluntary nature were beneficial, but you can imagine that there's great concern at the national level as well.
Commissioner Bedell?
Andy, we're delighted every year to hear your presentation. What a fabulous job.
Thank you.
And a lot of work, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yes, absolutely. All right, thank you.
Echo those comments
You weren't
as
up there
well.
this
All
time.
right.
Why?
Thank you. Mike,
I'm back.
back to regulations.
Yes. Madam Chair, beginning on page 8 of your packet, you'll find the order of rulemaking for 3 CSR 10-7.440 migratory game birds and waterfowl seasons limits to establish the 2019-2020 migratory bird and waterfowl hunting seasons. I request Commission approval of these regulations as presented by Dr. Radke and described in your regulation packet.
Do we have a motion for that?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion?
I'm still trying to find page 8.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, as Dr. Radke indicated, the President recently signed federal legislation pertaining to waterfowl hunting that includes a provision for states to offer active duty military members and veterans of the armed services a special 2-day season. The department certainly appreciates the sacrifice of these brave men and women and currently shows support for our veterans and military by offering some permit exemptions depending on their specific situation, and allows active duty military members stationed in Missouri and their immediate family members residing with them to purchase resident permits. Allocating a special season for this group of individuals would likely create a demand for additional special seasons for other fish and game species by other equally deserving groups, such as first responders, law enforcement, firefighters, senior citizens, first-time hunters, and those with disabilities and physical limitations. Given the department's desire to maintain an even playing field for all hunters, as Dr. Radke indicated, the Regulations Committee does not recommend offering a special season for veterans and military in 2019. However, we will continue to review requests as they are received and recommend adjustments to season structures as necessary. Madam Chair, with your permission, I'd like to provide an update on the department's progress on regulations to establish an elk hunting season.
Please proceed. We're all interested in that.
As you know, this past December, staff held a series of open houses in Ellington, Eminence, and Van Buren to meet with citizens and collect input on season structure and options. Following these meetings, members of the elk population management team reviewed and incorporated the input received into the initial draft of the elk regulation recommendations. Those recommendations were reviewed by Resource Division Chiefs in March, and their suggested changes will be incorporated as the final recommendations are drafted. As we move forward, the timeline calls for Resource Science Division to present the final recommendations to the Regulations Committee in early June, and those recommendations will be submitted for initial commission consideration during your meeting on June 28th. Additional public input will be solicited during the formal 30-day comment period in August, and those comments will be summarized on final orders of rulemaking that will be presented to the commission for a final vote during your meeting in October. If the commission votes to approve those final orders of rulemaking, the anticipated effective date of changes would be December 30th of 2019, and Missouri's initial elk hunting season would occur in the fall of 2020. This is the first time in at least the last 3 decades that an entirely new hunting season will be established in our state. Consequently, I'd like to alert the commission to the magnitude of the changes associated with establishing a new season. At this point in time, I anticipate at least 2 new rules will be crafted and at least 32 regulations will have to be modified to establish Missouri's elk hunting season. Commissioners, since my last report, citizens have provided input on regulations pertaining to fall deer and spring turkey seasons, resident and non-resident permit fees, and rules that govern activities allowed on public land. A summary of those comments is included in my formal report beginning on page 9. Upcoming meetings of the Regulation Committee are scheduled for June 5th, July 18th, which is mid-year code review, September 12th, and November 19th of 2019. Madam Chair, unless you or members of the Commission have questions, this includes my Regulations Committee report.
Thank you, Mike. Commissioners, comments?
Are you going to give us an overview of the elk population at this stage of the game?
We certainly will. It'll probably be associated with the regulation recommendation proposal, so the commission is up to speed with what the population's looking like, what our models are suggesting, where our survival rates are, our numbers, and all of that stuff to go in along with your consideration of that season structure and methods.
Okay.
So that'll occur probably at your June meeting at the same time.
Further comments, questions? Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Well, at this time, Madam Chair, I'd like to introduce our next speaker.
Right.
Commissioners, Laura Conley is an animal resource scientist with the Missouri Department of Conservation based out of Columbia. She started with the department in November of 2016 as our fur bear and black bear biologist, and as such oversees our large-scale black bear research project and various other fur bear research and monitoring efforts. Laura holds a bachelor's degree from Northern Illinois University and a master's degree in zoology from Southern Illinois University. Prior to working for our department, she served as a fur bear and black bear project leader and assistant director of wildlife with the Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife. Today, Laura is going to provide an update on our black bear research project and discuss updates to Missouri's black bear management plan. Laura? Welcome.
Good morning, Laura, and welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to present a brief update on our black bear research project, as well as some discussions on our black bear management plan, some updates that the department has been working on. So first, I'll talk a little bit about our black bear population, the current status of our population, and where we're going with our current research project. So just to give a brief history of bears in the state of Missouri, they were once abundant throughout forested areas, throughout a large portion of the state. Early settlers often spoke about the abundance of bears. They were primarily harvested for their fur, for their lard, and for their meat, but due to overexploitation and habitat loss, bears were thought to have been extirpated by the 1950s. Our research indicates that we did likely have a very small remnant bear population in the state, but for all intents and purposes, bear numbers were extremely, extremely low for a long portion of time in the 1900s. Now, Arkansas did a reintroduction project for black bear in the Ozarks and Ouachita Mountains of northern Arkansas from the 1950s and 1960s, and inevitably some of those bears made their way into Missouri. Most of those bears weren't tagged until later in that reintroduction process, and a handful of those tagged bears did show up later on. And over time, our bear numbers began to increase. So reports increased, sightings from the general public increased. We started to get more reports of females with cubs, and things like that, primarily in the very southern part of the state. And over time, it was recognized that Missouri did have growing numbers of bears. The question was whether or not we had a viable population in the state, or were these bears just wandering in from Arkansas from that growing population? Our first management plan was developed in the early 1990s, and that largely focused on assessing the distribution of sightings, determining potential habitat for black bears, and gaining an understanding of whether or not we started to have that actual resident population within the state. That management plan was updated in 2008, and the purpose of that plan really identified gaining an understanding of our black bear population. So it was recognized at that time that sightings had dramatically increased. It was thought that we did have a breeding resident population of bears within the state, but the question at that time was how many bears do we have? What habitats can they occur in? And that plan outlined some critical research needs to really determine the status of our bear population, as well as identifying some educational components and how to manage nuisance bears within the state. So in 2012, we estimated our black bear population to be just under 300 animals, and looking at that growth, right now we say we have about 350 bears based on that 2012 population estimate. But the one thing that we know about bears right now is they're becoming increasingly more common. So we can see that based on bear sightings, the reports that we get from the public, and our current research project, that bear numbers are growing within this state. So we do know we have a breeding bear population within the state of Missouri, and that range is expanding. And we'll go into a little bit more detail on that range and sightings that are submitted by the public. But with that growing population size, we have had those discussions about implementing a limited harvest season when we reach an established population of 500 bears. So looking at that, our current research project will help us determine when in fact we will reach that population benchmark of 500. But with that growing population, we also see that nuisance complaints are increasing and they're becoming more geographically widespread. So coming in June and July, if you look to the news in the St. Louis area around Lake of the Ozarks, inevitably you'll see stories about bears showing up in some of these locations. And when we look at bear sightings within the state of Missouri, the bulk of our population is really south of Interstate 44. So the red area highlighted here primarily overlaps our large forested areas of the southern Ozarks, and that's our established bear range. So in this area, we have regular bear breeding, we have that growing component of our population, but we also have some expansion areas within the state. So we do know that our bear population is growing, and the range of black bear within the state of Missouri is expanding. So if you look to some of these highlighted areas in blue, these are locations where we're starting to get an increasing number of bear sightings into some of these more forested areas. And when you look at some of those areas, it can highlight the potential challenges that we're in for in the future as our bear population continues to grow. So that blue expansion area towards the central part of the state, that's right around Lake of the Ozarks, the blue expansion area that's just south of St. Louis, comes into contact with more of our urban areas, more suburban areas, larger human population densities. And so in these areas, when we have bears coming into some of these locations, they become very visible. They become a topic of conversation. So last year in June, we had a bear that showed up in Baldwin, Missouri, so right outside of St. Louis, and that bear alone generated numerous reports, numerous media stories, a lot of interest from the public because it was quite visible and it was going from neighborhood to neighborhood, looking for food, visiting bird feeders, visiting trash, things like that. And so as those bear numbers increase, this is likely to continue, and those incidents of these wandering bears showing up into some of these areas is only likely to become more frequent. And eventually we will have females that move into some of these areas, so we would be looking at the potential for breeding bears close to some of these areas with greater human population densities. Now, the challenge around Lake of the Ozarks is something that we currently see in the Branson area. We have a very seasonal population, a lot of folks that come in, spend a week, and then they move on and they're just visiting the area. So educating a seasonal public that comes through can often be quite challenging. Whether or not they have experience camping or hiking or visiting bear country is unknown at the time, and working with those communities can often be challenging, trying to get everybody on board with managing food attractants, things like trash and bird feeders, that type of thing. And as we move forward with looking at bear management into the future, those expansion areas and some of these areas where our bear numbers are growing will become quite critical as we move forward with public education. Now, some of the information that we can glean from these bear sightings is not just where bears are showing up. That's important, and that helps us determine where we have bears expanding into some of these areas. But the other thing that we can look at are what type of calls are we getting and reports are we getting. So individuals can submit these sighting reports through a variety of different mechanisms. We have observation cards at nature centers and at our regional offices that folks can fill out and mail to us. They can submit those reports directly to the nature centers, directly to those regional offices, and they can also submit reports online. So we have an online report form that allows individuals to submit their sighting information, the location, as well as upload a photograph so we can determine whether or not it is a bear. We can see if it's a marked bear or not because we do have bears that are ear tagged and collared. But we can also assess what the reason is that that person is reporting that bear sighting. So is it an observation? Is it an interaction? And an interaction would be something along the lines of a bear getting into a trash can, a bear visiting a bird feeder, those types of things where you would consider them more nuisance activities. So looking at this map, the highlighted areas of blue, so this pie chart illustrates different counties, the number of reports that they've gotten based on type. And we can see that by and large, our reports are observations. So this is somebody seeing a bear while they're out hiking. This is a bear that crossed the road in front of them. This could be a bear that's seen on a trail camera. And that is good news. So the majority of our reports are not nuisance incidents or anything like that. They're just simply sightings. And for the most part, a lot of folks in Missouri, they get very excited about that. So when they get a trail camera picture of a bear, they send in that initial picture, and we often have regular conversation as they get more pictures. For some, it's a very unique sighting. For others that live kind of within that very established range, they get used to seeing some of these bears, and they kind of submit their annual report to us every year on how many they saw, how many females, things like that. But we can look at this information in a little bit different way also. So one, we can see that the bulk of our sightings come in as observations. That's a good thing. And then we can take those interactions and we can break them down by the type of interaction that we're seeing. So looking at whether or not it's a trash issue, whether or not it's bird feeder issues, in some locations deer feeder issues, things like that, that can help us really determine how we should target education in some of these more local communities. How can we work with residents in those areas to understand the type of interactions that are occurring? And so in some locations you can see red is trash, green are bird feeders, and so depending on the location, sometimes it's all trash issues, sometimes it's all bird feeder issues, or nearly that way. But we can look at this and then we can assess how those interactions change over time based on our different educational efforts to see if we're moving the needle on that. And then we can also look at the ratio of these interactions to observations. So ideally, we would like to see all of our bear reports be just observations, a sighting that somebody's excited about, they saw a bear and they want to report it to us. But the reality of the situation is when you have bears occurring in the same areas that you have humans, there's going to be conflict. It's inevitable based on bear behavior. They look for easy food sources, and sometimes that comes in the form of trash and of bird feeders. So we can take this information and look at how we're moving that needle, target some of that education, and then look at different geographies, especially in some of those expansion areas, get ahead of the curve in terms of some of these nuisance issues as bears become more common, say, south of St. Louis or around Lake of the Ozarks. Now, we do have a bear research project going on right now. So this bear research project is primarily focused at looking at bear reproduction and survival. So our main goal is to develop a population model so that we can determine how quickly that bear population is growing and assess that population size. So with that population model, we'll be able to see when we would hit that 500 bear benchmark, or at least project that into the future. And then we can also test various harvest scenarios. So the photograph here is a photo that we had at a den location down in the Willow Springs area. It's one that you'll see on our website. We have a lot of trail camera photos out there, and we kind of use that as a means to educate the public on the research project, as well as educating on the different den types that bears might use and try to gain more of that interest. But we visit dens every winter, and we do this in order to determine cub production and survival. So we can go to the den locations of these collared females, see how many cubs they have, and then we can follow them to the next year, see how many of those cubs survive to 1 year old, and then we can also assess that adult female survival. So on average, our bears here in Missouri have about 2 cubs per litter, and that's generally reproducing every other year. That falls right in line with normal values that we see throughout the United States and other locations. Our adult female survival rates are quite high, so they range from 95 to 99% annually. So that's one of the reasons that we have this growing population. With high adult female survival, they're the main component that drives that population growth. So it's not surprising that we are seeing this growth and expansion. So we just completed this last den season. We had 27 bears collared. We visited all but 3 of those, or 4 of those den locations. We immobilized multiple sows, handled about 20 cubs this season, so got sex ratios and things like that. And all of that information is going to be incorporated into the latest run of our population model. And we're hoping to have that final model run sometime within 2019. So we should be able to project when we'll be reaching that 500 bear benchmark, as well as having a more updated population estimate. And we can use this model then to test various harvest scenarios. So look at different harvest rates of male and female, different age classes, and see what that does to our population growth rate, and we can help make those determinations based on that model itself. We also, since we have these collars on all these female bears, we have the opportunity to look really in detail at habitat use and availability. So some of the main things that we're looking at right now are corridors, fine scale habitat use, range expansion, and potential. So taking this habitat information and really looking at where across the state of Missouri do we think we'll have black bears into the future as that population continues to grow? What are some of these corridors that might lead bears into some of these areas? So highlighting some of those locations that might funnel bears into the St. Louis area. And then also looking at how these corridors affect and how that habitat affects potential harvest management. So one of the things that we've most recently looked at with our black bear population and that habitat use are differences between males and females. So with our male component of the population, they can occupy a larger range of forested habitat here in the state, but females can take up a little bit less space in terms of that forested habitat. So the requirements of males and females are slightly different. And that's important when we look forward at setting harvest recommendations and a regulatory framework for those bears. We can take into account where we're likely to have that breeding component of bears occur, where that male component will occur, but we may not have females occurring. And we can use that information to really make informed decisions on how we approach a potential bear harvest season. And we can also use that habitat information to target public education. So you'll hear me talk a lot about public education when it comes to bears. If you look at any of the information we have on the website, we discuss a lot in detail about being bear aware, what you can do to prevent interactions and complications when you have bears occurring in some areas. And that education is really, really important. We know bears are a valuable part of our biodiversity here, and we want to see that bear population remain viable into the future. And one of the best ways to do that is to ensure that we have adequate public education. And we have so much outreach efforts right now, and we're really making a dent in terms of educating the public. We try to get word out in a lot of different ways, but there may be some additional things that we can do to really focus that message so that we're reaching specific groups within some of these expansion areas and within that established bear range to make sure that we are reaching those groups that we need to be reaching into the future. And so with that, I'll move into just a bit of our management plan update, as well as a discussion on the Missouri Black Bear Task Force. So the Black Bear Task Force was established in 2017, and the initial charge of that task force was to evaluate and update the current bear management plan, and then provide that plan out for public comment to determine whether or not that needed to be adjusted. And then when appropriate, this task force would transition to more a regulatory advisory group, similar to the Cervid Task Force and the Wild Turkey Task Force. The Bear Task Force consists of members from a variety of different divisions within the department, resource science, policy, protection, forestry, permit services, outreach, and all of these different members of the task force provide valuable input on their areas of expertise, and it's a really good opportunity for us to look at this management plan from an all-encompassing, holistic view. How can we update this management plan so that it makes the most sense for everybody that's working in these different divisions? And then we also brought in agency partners at the beginning of that development, of updating this management plan. Now, the 2008 management plan was developed with the Forest Service, the Department of Natural Resources, and the National Park Service. And so in terms of looking at it from this current update, we felt that it was really important to get those agency partners in from the ground up and work on updating that plan. The bulk of our bear population in some areas can occur on Forest Service land, so the Forest Service pays very close attention to what's going on with black bears. The Park Service deals with folks coming in and camping and the reports that they get from the public, as well as the Department of Natural Resources. They have black bear on a number of their state parks. And so looking at how our management plan could impact their operations, what they do, and the desires that they have moving forward with our black bear population, it was a really good opportunity for us to all sit down at that table and have those discussions. Now, when we began updating the plan, one of the things that became very apparent was that we are at a different place with our bear population. So we are looking at a paradigm shift in terms of bear management. Previously, we had been looking at how can we gain an understanding of our bear population? What are the things that we can do to be proactive with education, but really gaining that baseline information. What habitats do bears use? Where is our population at? What are the details of that population in particular? We're at a different point now. We know that that population is growing and expanding, and we are starting to feel the effects of that growing and expanding population in terms of increases in nuisance activity, increased reports from the public, as well as increased interest in that potential harvest season. So in looking at that, we updated that goal statement to really focus on science-based methods to manage a self-sustaining population, because that's the ultimate goal, that we maintain that viable bear population, while minimizing bear conflict, increasing awareness, and recreational opportunities for the public here in Missouri. So that goal is a little bit of a shift from the previous goal, or the previous goal statement for that plan. And when you look at the goals of our plan, they also have kind of that shift. So they're focused more on how we can take the understanding that we have, what are some of the research needs that we have in the future, but using that for proactively managing this bear population. So goal one, using science-based methods to manage that self-sustaining bear population, focusing on researching and monitoring the bear population, population management, and habitat management. So looking at some of that corridor work, looking at those different population goals in the future, potentially establishing population benchmarks. Where would we like to see our population make it to, stabilize? What instances would we want to decrease that population? And using harvest as the primary tool to address those population goals. Goal two is really gaining an understanding of how the public in Missouri views our bear population. What are folks' opinions on the number of bears, their opinions on bear sightings? Are we doing an adequate job with our bear education? Are there things that we could be doing differently? And then gaining that understanding of how folks would want to see a harvest season implemented and the potential there for bear becoming that valuable game species here in the state. Goal three is a really simple one: minimize and address human-bear conflicts. And this goal takes the shape in two forms: being proactive and reactive. So ideally, we would have zero human-bear conflicts. But the reality of the situation is that's not very likely to occur. Just by the nature of bears and humans, we are always likely to have conflict. But how can we proactively address that so we can minimize the numbers of conflicts and the type of conflicts that we have? And then when we do have those conflicts occur, how can we respond to those conflicts? And we've already done a number of things within the department related to this. We have bear response guidelines that staff follow in the field. We have a wildlife human attack response team in the event that that unlikely scenario were to occur. But we do have a lot of the foundation laid here for how do we address those bear conflicts and how do we be proactive about managing those. But that, when you look to areas outside of the country, this is a really critical component, because as bear numbers increase, human conflicts inevitably increase. And as we have bears expanding into new areas, the conflicts in those areas are likely to occur, and they're likely to occur at a more dramatic rate just because we have a public that's largely inexperienced with living with bears. So the learning curve there can be quite steep. So we want to get ahead of that curve and be as proactive as we can. And then increasing that statewide awareness of Missouri's bear population through coordinated outreach. And this takes two forms also. So looking at targeted outreach statewide, different user groups and folks that might be interested in bears for a variety of different reasons, but then also looking at targeted geographies. Where can we take specific messages within the state that would have the most impact? We can provide people with a lot of information about bears, but we want to make sure that the critical information is getting to the different groups that it needs to be, that we need to be reaching. And we can do this in a variety of ways. So in-person outreach, where we're going to fairs and we're doing presentations and public meetings and things like that, as well as multimedia outreach. So publications, different types of interviews, wild webcasts, as well as working with news organizations and things like that to really get that targeted message out there. So in terms of taking this draft plan out for public comment, our communications team has met and we've started the preliminary discussions related to this. We would put together a substantial amount of online material, FAQs for the public and FAQs and talking points for staff, so that staff can be well versed in the specifics of the bear management plan, why we're proposing to go the direction that we're going, as well as advertising the public input process. So we'd like to conduct open houses through July and August, gather input on that plan. We would utilize Turning Point technology, and then we would also collect online comments from July through September. And those online forms that folks could submit would mimic the open houses. So all of the material that would be provided at open houses will be available online. It will be available through wild webcasts and different types of webinars, and we'll make sure that statewide message occurs and allow for folks that can't attend open houses that they could come in and take that public comment. And right now we're looking at open houses in the bulk of Bear Range and in the St. Louis area, and then taking that statewide message available through webinars, wild webcasts, things like that. And then the hope would be to summarize those comments and update that management plan over the course of the fall. Now, in terms of future bear work, we are looking forward to completing that population model and the habitat work. Our current study ends in fiscal year 21, so we're approaching the end of that study. We've made great strides. We've tagged over 180 bears. We've collared over 100 bears. We've monitored the reproduction over the course of several years of nearly 60 sows. So we have a lot of really solid data used to make these management decisions and really guide where we go with our bear management into the future. We'll also be finalizing that management plan based on that public comment. And the Black Bear Task Force would then take that plan, prioritize our strategies and objectives so that we can strategically implement different components of that plan to reach the most broad audience, to make the greatest impact that we can early on. And we would also take that task force and start developing that regulatory framework. So we're prepared for that 500 bear benchmark to look at how that hunting season would occur, what are the types of things that we might be able to do, and then taking that potential regulatory framework out for public comment to really get an understanding of what bear harvest could look like in the state of Missouri. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Laura. Commissioners, comments, questions?
Well, that's a lot. So you tag some bears and collar others.
Yeah.
I think I know the difference, but why do you do one over the other?
So any bear that gets handled has ear tags affixed to them. For any cub that's handled, we put in a microchip. So it's basically like what you use on a dog or a cat. We can identify those bears further down the road. And then we collar specific bears. So right now the focus of our project is on adult females. So we're collaring females that are within that breeding age class. We have a couple of yearling collars out there that we'll be deploying this trapping season to look at some of those dispersal corridors. Where are these bears moving to? How are they using different habitats to disperse? And then males get ear tagged. And so we're not currently collaring them. They had been collared in the past, in the previous study that we had done here. But any bear that comes through gets marked, and that allows us to monitor survival. So every time they come through one of our trap sites, we can tell which bear that is. And it's also useful. We get a lot of reports from the public. And so those ear tag numbers are often visible through trail camera pictures. A lot of times bears explore those trail cameras and you get an up-close shot and you can make out the numbers. And that helps us just keep track of where some of these study bears are showing up. Those males move huge distances. We've had Missouri males harvested in the Arkansas hunting season, and so it's very useful for us to know, what proportion of those tag bears that's occurring with, how many of our tag bears show up as roadkill or are killed for nuisance issues and things like that. So a variety of different tagging methods that we can use.
So you're trying to grow the population to 500? Is that the number?
So 500 is the benchmark that was established in the 2008 bear management plan. And our population, it's certainly growing, and we'll be able to determine, hopefully in the near future, when that benchmark would be reached.
Can you make it grow faster if you want? Go buy, no, I mean,
So
go
a
buy
lot of,
beers, go to a beer store somewhere.
right, so a lot of that growth rate really comes down to that adult female survival and the cub production, which is why we're really focused on analyzing that information right now. So those really high female survival rates, that 95 to 99%, contribute in most places to rapid growth of the population. And that becomes really important also. When we look down the road, we can have a bear population that continues to grow, but eventually we'll reach a point where we'll say, we want to slow that growth, we want to stabilize that. So understanding the dynamics of that population will be really critical, because affecting that adult female survival is how you would drive the population growth in that point.
Commissioner Bedell?
I don't think you're passionate enough about what you're doing, and you're lacking knowledge subject. I didn't see you look at a note the whole time. You look kind of like Andy. The commissioner should know that the best bait for these bear is donuts.
Yeah.
So be careful if you're in the woods eating a donut. You might get visited by one of these. Anyway, thank you very much, Laura.
Welcome. Thank you.
Very enlightening, and I think it would be good for the commissioner to go on one of these bear deals here and
Absolutely.
to see exactly what they do and to weigh them. And then the only advice I would give you, never try to outrun one. Thank you very much. Very good report.
Commissioner Murphy?
I'm delighted with your presentation.
Thank
I do
you.
have a lot of questions. And I'll try to be brief, but am I correct in remembering that we've had no introductions of bears? This department's never released bears.
Correct.
And
Correct.
so sometimes people ask us about that, and I wanted to absolutely confirm that this is a natural trend that we're trying to monitor and to develop.
Absolutely.
I wonder if, as we approach and implement a hunting season for bears, which in my mind, I think of, like the elk population, it's a clear objective to have that as the way that we manage this
Right.
resource in the future. And I wonder what challenges we can expect with the landowners, because it's a different scenario than it is with elk, which are brought in, released. This is something that they're very familiar to the landowners. They have pictures of them. They think very highly of them. They prize them and value them. Do you expect that to be particularly challenging as we try to implement a hunting season?
I do. I think that's a possibility. I think we have a variety of landowners that are interested in that opportunity, and they certainly manage their properties to provide that potential for bear to use their properties. But that brings up a good point, and one of the reasons that we are really looking so in-depth at our bear population and really trying to get such a detailed understanding of its growth and how harvest might impact that growth and where we have bears within the state. Bears are one of those species that drum up a lot of interest, both in the positive and the negative. And so recognizing that and looking to other states, as we move forward with implementing a harvest season, there is potential for various types of challenges, both within the state and from outside organizations. So making sure that we have very good detailed information that we can use to make those management decisions is really important. And then looking at that bear management plan, taking that multifaceted approach. So we recognize that harvest is a key component to managing that bear population, but we also have work in education and nuisance issues and human-bear conflict. And some of the habitat work that we're doing might help elucidate where we would likely have higher harvest on private land versus public land, what some of those challenges could be moving forward. So we can start those discussions with landowners as well as public landowners.
Two more very specific questions and then a comment. The first, can we expect the fecundity of the females can we expect them to be producing litters into their 20s?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So female bears typically live between 20 to 25 years in the wild. They stop reproducing somewhere within those mid-20s to early 20s. And The tricky part with females, and one of the reasons that bear populations can grow so substantially, when they have that first litter, they're not very good about raising that litter. So survival rates of those cubs with that first litter is pretty low. And those first litters typically occur between 3 and 5 years. And that's some of the information that we're gathering from our current study. But as they reach that adult age class of 5 to 6 years old plus, and they've had multiple litters, they do a very good job of keeping those litters alive till 1, and then the mortality kicks in for those dispersing bears. So bears are most vulnerable when they reach their 1 to 3 year old age class, and in particular males because they disperse so far. So we can expect absolutely that we would have that high reproductive capacity for those older age class bears as they continue to grow, and as new bears move into that population, I wouldn't expect any changes within that.
My last question has to do with something that wasn't represented as an interaction between bears and people. We have a fairly significant beekeeping industry in our state, and what's that been like thus far? It wasn't spelled out as specific.
The interaction list is a very long one, so for demonstration purposes, we had to condense some of those different categories and highlight some of the ones that are typically our most common. So trash and bird feeders typically are our most common interaction type, but we certainly have interactions with beekeepers. A lot of our damage biologists are very proactive with that. They go out and speak with beekeeper organizations. They work with beekeepers to set up temporary electric fencing if they start to have bear issues. But one of the things that we would look to do, and the damage folks and regional staff in Southwest region and Ozark region, as well as in some areas of Central region, they're being proactive in getting the message out that electric fencing to start with is a really good idea. Beekeeping, it tends to be an operation that requires a lot of monetary input to get it started. And so when a bear comes in, they can knock all the supers over. You could have substantial hive loss in a very short time period. So investing in that electric fencing on the startup, think about it as a startup cost rather than something that you have to do afterwards, preventing those conflicts.
In my case, it helped with raccoons, too.
It does, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So we have folks that go out and they'll help set up the fence. They'll visit fences to see, why the bear might be getting in. With bears and those that long live, up to 25 years, they have a long time to remember where they get food and how they got food. So if a bear finds a beehive and they get food in that way, that bear's likely to continue that behavior. So a lot of that proactive education is really important so that we can keep bears focused on natural foods rather than letting them develop kind of that pattern of looking for those human-associated foods.
Great. Well, the experience and the abilities that you bring to this gives me a lot of confidence with you and the task force that we're going to get this right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Laura, I totally interested as well, a few questions. You mentioned that there aren't many reports on nuisance yet. Is that because of the lower numbers, or what do you attribute that
So
to?
those numbers are increasing. I mean, we certainly do get nuisance reports, and I don't have the exact number off the top of my head as to what those were, but compared to other states, it's relatively low. And a lot of it does have to do with the fact that our bear population is not a very dense bear population. When you look at how widespread those reports are, we have bears that occur over a large geographic area, so it's not a very dense population at this point. But a lot of those nuisance complaints do come from areas where folks might not be as used to living with bears. So where we have bears showing up in more suburban locations, and one bear in particular can generate a substantial number of nuisance complaints on its own. So that Baldwin bear, when he was going through some of those locations, he wasn't particularly active in terms of breaking into dumpsters and things like that, but he'd visit trash cans, he'd visit bird feeders, and he was very visible. So just one bear generated a substantial number of those interaction type calls. And I think a lot has to do with the education efforts that we're already doing. So we certainly get the word out every single year. We have a Bear Aware news release that'll be coming out shortly. Every single year that goes out. When we're trapping and when we're doing the den work, we use that opportunity through Facebook and through posts and social media and things like that with our communications staff to really highlight the work that we're doing, but also to drive that message home about preventing conflicts and things like that. So that messaging in and of itself is all over the place. So we do a really good job right now trying to remind people to avoid those conflicts. So I think it's a combination of factors, but as that population grows, we are likely to experience challenges. So we do want to be ahead of those challenges. especially in those expansion areas.
I applaud the involvement of communication efforts in the communication team here, because, I mean, do you have a plan for when vacations start? We have urban families moving into the parks and the forests and being somewhat unbear aware, you
Absolutely.
might say.
Yeah, so our Bearware program is run out of the Wildlife Division, and they do an excellent job of getting Bearware information out to campsites, to state parks. They have signs that are produced, and so you go to a campsite in the Ozarks, you are highly likely to see a Be Bearware sign that has the messages that are consistent with the messages that are on our website, that come out in news releases. So the Bearware staff do a lot of work getting that message out there. And then with social media, with the MDC posts, we have a lot of followers, and we get that message out in a lot of different venues as well. And then when issues do occur, we have that damaged staff within the Wildlife Division that show up. Protection staff also get tons and tons of calls. So those protection staff will respond to those campsites, and everybody has that same messaging. What to do to be bear aware, what you can do to prevent those conflicts. And I mean, we've had staff that go out and put electric fencing up around dumpsters to get the bear to move on. They have aversive conditioning techniques where they can use rubber bullets or cracker shells to scare bears away. So there's a substantial effort that's going on right now by a variety of different divisions within the department that do tons of work related to bear. So the research project is out of resource science, and that task force encompasses a variety of different divisions. But the on-the-ground bear management that's occurs at all levels of this department.
Appreciate that. One last comment, and you mentioned outreach at these public fairs, and that's where you can reach a lot of people that are not particularly aware of bears, and families, and in efforts I've been involved with before.
Yep.
I mean, that's where you get the people that we don't reach online or through our materials, and really,
Yeah.
I think that's a great thing.
Absolutely.
Your vacationing people, that's a challenge.
They are challenging, absolutely. That is one of the bigger challenges when we look to Branson. One of our damage biologists in the Southwest region, he had visited a location on numerous times for a bear that was getting into a dumpster. And each week that he's there, it's a different set of families that are staying in the cabins. And so basically, his messaging starts from scratch. And he worked with the landowner to try to help alleviate some of that issue. But that is in particular a challenge. And so with that, I think we'll be looking at, how can we target some of those groups? And are there other ways that we can address some of those things? Missouri is actually hosting the Eastern Black Bear Workshop here in about a week and a half. And that's a workshop where we have regional and state biologists coming from all over the country. And one of the sessions in that workshop is outreach and education, and the importance of talking points and effective communication. Heather Feeler with the department is going to be presenting on social media and talking points. But it's a really good opportunity for us here in the department to have that interaction with other states, to provide what we're doing, but also to see what other states are doing and bounce those ideas off of one another. So I'm looking forward to that.
Assuming you're doing it in the schools too, with
The
our Discover
education?
Nature, because our kids teach us a lot.
Yep, and that's actually one of, absolutely. And we found, if we can get kids on board, a lot of times you'll have kids will, tell their mom and
Excited.
dad, like, no, you're not supposed to put the trash out the night before,
Exactly.
do it in the morning. And so we're certainly moving towards it. In a lot of situations, it's part of a lot of our nature programs, a lot of the programs that we do with children and things like that. But as part of the plan, the proposed management plan, that's one of the things that we can look at. Where else can we put that messaging, and are there more things that we can couple that bear message with? So, yeah.
We're all excited about your efforts and
Good,
really
thank you.
appreciate your dedication and
Thank you.
clearly love for the bears of Missouri. So thank you. Any
Thank
further
you.
questions, comments?
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Great
Thank you very
job.
much.
Thank you,
Appreciate the
Laura. We
opportunity.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
And then, before we proceed to the next, let's take a 10-minute break. welcome back, everyone, and we're going to turn it back to Mike, and we're going to hear about feral hogs.
Correct. Commissioners, our next presentation will be provided by Mr. Alan Larry. Alan currently serves as the interim wildlife management chief for the Ozark unit. Alan has a bachelor's degree in wildlife management and biology from the University of Wisconsin at Stevens Point, and he has a master's degree in biology from Boise State University. He spent 10 years as a senior endangered species specialist for the Missouri Department of Transportation before coming to the department in 2011 as a policy coordinator. In 2014, Alan moved to Wildlife Division and assumed the role of Wildlife Management Coordinator. Alan joins us today to provide an update on Missouri's feral hog elimination effort. Welcome, Alan. I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, Alan.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and provide you an update on our feral hog program. Oh, I went twice. Okay. All right, so here in Missouri, we have a very strong and productive partnership in our battle against feral hogs, and I've listed the members of the partnership here on this slide. The Conservation Department leads this partnership. One of the reasons I think this partnership has been so productive and so successful is because all the members have the same goal, and they're dedicated to that goal, and that is complete elimination of feral hogs from the state. We don't have members that would be satisfied with just controlling damage. We all want them completely gone. And our partnership has gained national attention. I've been invited several times to come to conferences and give presentations about our program and about our partnership so other states can see and hopefully model their programs after what we're doing here. Just a couple weeks ago, I was at a conference, and the assistant director for the U.S. Department of Agriculture's National Feral Swine Program was there, and he was giving a review of the first 5 years of their program. And partway through his presentation, he said, "Now I'd like to provide an example of a productive and successful program," and Missouri was his example. He talked about our partnership. He talked about our strategic plan and how we've divided the state into elimination areas. So that was a nice acknowledgement of what we've got going on here. We also partner with some of the agricultural groups, and I've listed a few here. There's certainly more than that, but I couldn't get them all on a slide, and I didn't want to forget any, so I just listed a few. Some of these organizations have provided funding for us to use to purchase equipment and also for outreach efforts, and they've also, some of them have published articles about feral hogs in the journals that they send out to their membership, and that's been very useful. That's an outreach audience that we wouldn't have the opportunity to reach otherwise. We also have partnerships with some of the conservation organizations, and some of them have also provided funding and other resources for us to use in our efforts. And then, of course, we partner with hundreds of private landowners in the state. So around the end of 2016, the partnership decided we needed to develop a strategic plan to guide our efforts. We realized we'd been very reactive up to that point. We would assist landowners if they would call and ask for help, but we didn't really have a vision on how to get to where we were going. So we needed to get a proactive approach, and we also wanted to develop a plan so all of the partners were focusing their resources in the same area, and we were using a cooperative effort so we could be as efficient as possible with the resources that we had. So we completed the plan in 2017 in time for the 2018, or the fiscal year 2018 budget cycle. We submitted a request, and the Conservation Commission funded that request. So we started implementing the strategic plan on July 1st of 2017. And this is a page out of the plan. The yellowish gold shapes represent the elimination areas that we've designated, and they're numbered. And then the red circles or shapes represent the approximate distribution of feral hogs at the end of 2017. And the blue shapes represent the approximate distribution at the end of 2018. So a part of the plan was that we designate the elimination areas, and then we also tried to determine how many full-time trappers we might need in each of those elimination areas to be successful at eliminating feral hogs from the state, and that's what drove the request for the budget request.
Do you have that same map for prior years?
We have it for a couple of years back. We don't have it as detailed real far back because we didn't have a lot of staff working, real seriously at the effort, going real far back. But we're working with the United States Department of Agricultural folks right now to try and develop some of that, to try and compile the information that we do have as far back as we can go to show that.
Just to show the growth or
Yeah, and hopefully the second part, as we go forward, we're going to see the shrinking. Up to about 2017, it was probably a steady expansion, and now hopefully, and that's kind of where we're headed with this slide. This particular slide is kind of starting to show results. So this is a blown up version of Elimination Area 1 from the last slide. And one of the reasons, there were several reasons why we chose this to be Elimination Area 1 and why we numbered the other ones the way we did. And one of the reasons this one rose to the top was because almost all, if not all, of the public land in this elimination area is owned by the Conservation Department or the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And both of our agencies have banned hog hunting on the property that we own, and that's a huge help to our trapping efforts. It's definitely a detriment to our trapping efforts when we have folks disturbing our trap sites and running the hogs away from areas where we're getting them consistently coming to bait. So this slide shows that we're starting to see progress in Area 1. As I mentioned on the last slide, the red shapes indicate the approximate distribution of feral hogs at the end of 2017, and then the blue shapes indicate the approximate distribution at the end of 2018. So you can see quite a reduction in the distribution just in 1 year. Another example would be from January 1st of 2018 until the end of March of 2018, we removed 347 feral hogs from this particular area. And in the same time period, January 1st until the end of March of 2019, we only removed 93 hogs from this area. And that's with the same amount of effort, and we removed less than a third, and that's just because there were less hogs to remove. The staff that are working here on the ground in this area are spending a lot of time trying to find hogs now because we've gotten it down to the point where there's not that many left. Another example in our
Alan, hate to
Yeah.
interrupt you, but just for purposes, I think, of Commissioner Orscheln too, perhaps explain also how do hogs get in these different parts of the southern part of the state as well? Maybe explain how do we believe that we have these populations to begin with?
Yeah, we believe for the most part that you can see how they're spread out. It's not an expansion like this, and that's because we believe people are intentionally releasing them. They're wanting to move populations to create new populations to hunt. Why drive 4 hours if you can have one, close by? Of course, nobody wants them in their yard, so the distribution follows fairly closely to where the public land is in the state, because that's where people are going to want to put them, because no private landowner is going to want somebody to.
Penalty for doing that?
There is, yes, there is, and there's regularly in the legislature, there's proposals to maybe increase the penalties. There's where are we at now here?
Commissioner, the legislation was passed during the 2009 legislative session. It was part of Governor Blunt's executive task force. The legislation that made its way through the General Assembly and eventually to the governor's desk made it a Class D misdemeanor on your first 2 releases that you got caught, and then on the third one it was a Class D felony. Given that these folks can load up a bunch of hogs in a trailer and dump them out on Forest Service land in a matter of minutes, it's extremely difficult to catch these individuals. While it was a good attempt to put legislation on the book, it's also very complicated legislation, and that's one of the things we want to work with the Department of Agriculture on in the coming years, to straighten up the legislation that's out there right now to make the fines stiffer, and then clarify some of the language in the bill. So, thanks, Alan.
Thanks, Aaron. Okay, so another example, and I don't have a slide for this, but in Elimination Area 2, which is around the Fort Leonard Wood area, Pulaski, Phelps County area, where there's been a lot of hog activity, and we've done a lot of trapping there. We have a graduate student that is just finishing up her research, and her research involved trail cameras, and she's trying to develop a method for us to better determine occupancy. These maps were made from staff, knowing where hogs are, but she's trying to help us develop a method to get more accurate, and she put her cameras in areas where there have been hogs before, but we've captured a lot of hogs, and she had out 264 cameras, and only 26 of them, or about 10%, got photographs of hogs. So that shows that we've been pretty successful in that area as well. The cameras weren't directly associated with previous trap locations, but in the same general areas. So here's a look at the statewide numbers. These numbers are for all of the partners. These aren't just Department of Conservation folks or USDA folks. This is all of the partners as well as some other cooperators. And as I mentioned earlier, the strategic plan first was implemented on July 1st of 2017, and by the time the cooperative agreement was signed and staff were hired and they were put on the ground, we were pretty much getting into 2018, and you can see how the numbers went up quite a bit in 2018, and we're seeing very good numbers so far this year as well. So that's positive, and that's despite the fact that, I'm sorry, sir, go ahead.
You say that's positive, but that would say that there's more hogs to kill. Looking at a trend at 12,000.
Yes, sir. In some of the areas over, like in Area 4 in the southeast part of the state, there still are definitely a lot of hogs over there, and the numbers there are going up. But as I showed you on a previous slide over in Area 1, they're going down. So we first staffed up as staff came on, and they were kind of staggered as we brought them on board because the U.S. government was under a hiring freeze, so they were only able to hire several at a time. They went into Area 1 first, and then we staffed Area 2, and we moved through like that. So we're definitely further ahead in Area 1. The numbers are still going up over in Area 4 and Area 6, but hopefully soon we'll be showing a different stat, and it will look like the previous slide with Area 1 where numbers are going down.
It's like having 6 balloons in a swimming pool. You're trying to keep them all underwater.
Yeah, yes, that's a good analogy, sir. Yeah, so, and as far as how many staff are working on this, with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the APHIS folks, through cooperative agreement with MDC and other agencies, as well as some of their own funding, they have 28 staff that are full-time working on feral hogs. 26 of those staff are trappers, and 2 of them do some trapping and do some administrative. Then MDC, we have at least 30 staff that spend a decent amount of, a good percentage of their time on hogs as an additional duty to their normal work, and then some others that spend a minimal amount. And then we have 1 full-time staff that works just on hogs, and then we have 2 hourly staff that spend most of their time on hogs. And then other agencies in the state do not have anyone dedicated just to working on feral hogs, but they do have staff that put some of their time into working on feral hogs. So an idea of the dollars spent during fiscal year 18 by the department, you can see it was about $2.5 million, and the $1.8 million cooperative agreement with the United States Department of Agriculture is in the equipment and expense line here. So one problem that we still do have is interference with our trapping efforts, and one obstacle here is the fact that the U.S. Forest Service still allows hunting on the Mark Twain National Forest, and there's 1.5 million acres there. The Forest Service is currently working hard with the help of MDC and others to try and get a regulation. They're trying to pass a regulation to limit or eliminate feral hog hunting on their property, and that will be a very big help for us for our efforts, because when there's trapping going on the forest, we see disturbance, and then even on neighboring properties. This was on private property, but sometimes the hunters start hunting on Forest Service where it's legal for them to hunt, and then dogs do what dogs do when they're chasing animals, and they get off, they don't recognize boundary lines. And this photograph was on private property near Forest Service land, and you can see the dogs got in the trap, and they weren't able to, either weren't strong enough to lift it, or they didn't understand how the trap works, so one of the guys had to get in to lift the dogs back out of the trap. So it will be really a big deal if the Forest Service is able to pass this regulation. It will be really helpful for our efforts. Disease is a big concern for the agricultural industry. The U.S. Department of Agriculture does the disease sampling in Missouri. Their goal is to take 100 samples per year from the state of Missouri. For the 3 years I have listed here, they took 95 samples in 2016, and then they got 100 in 2017 and 2018. The 3 primary diseases that they're sampling for throughout the nation are pseudorabies, classic swine fever, and swine brucellosis. And so on this chart, the percentage of positives out of the 100 or 95 samples is on the left side, and then the year on the bottom. Now actually, to the agricultural industry, there's 3 diseases that are even more important than these, and those would be PEDV, which stands for porcine epidemic diarrhea virus, and PRRS, or PRRS, which stands for porcine reproductive and respiratory syndrome, and then African swine fever. And in the United States, the most economically significant of those is the PRRS, and that's estimated that it costs the swine industry, the domestic swine industry in the United States, $664 million per year, or $1.8 million per day approximately. And then globally, the African swine fever is the biggest concern, and that has not been detected in the United States yet, but that disease is at least 1 million deaths of domestic swine is attributed to that disease at this point, and potentially as many as 10 million. It's hard to know for sure, but the estimates range anywhere in that vicinity. So it's a concern if that would happen to get into the U.S. domestic swine or in feral hogs in the United States. And then I just wanted to mention some of the outreach efforts that we have going on. I think the outreach is extremely important. I think it's been really important in getting the program to where we're at this point, and I think it's going to be very important as we move forward to continue to educate the public and others in the state and keep them aware that feral hogs are a concern. And as we do start to see success, we still need to make sure those people remain vigilant and that they're aware that this is still a big problem, and if we get complacent, that it could come back. So our O&E staff and we work together real closely to come up with some of these things, and we try to hit a variety of different things. They have radio, they have television, they have newspapers and stuff. They have the fancy terms, print media and digital, but I didn't want to try and dive into that. I might goof some of that up. So they're trying to get all the different venues here and try and reach all sorts of different people, and they have a term for how many people actually hear it or listen to it. I don't remember that either, but this is going to touch a lot of people with this campaign that we have going. So we even have billboards. We had billboards a couple summers ago, and I think that was effective. Obviously, we have to keep it to a minimal number of words. We don't want to put a paragraph on there if people are driving 70 miles an hour, but just to remind them that feral hogs are a concern. So with that, I would try to answer any questions that you might have.
Commissioners, questions, comments? Commissioner Murphy.
Thank you for your report, Alan. Do you have any sort of an estimate as to how many people participate in hunting feral hogs in Missouri?
We do not. No estimate at all. And I think that it'd be a huge difference between I think there's a relatively small core group that really, really enjoys it. They're really into it. They're a member of some of the organizations and stuff. And then I think there's probably a little bit larger group that, are kind of casual. They go out with some.
Stick or
Yeah, exactly. But some of the ones that are very serious about it, they own dogs, they train dogs, they do it pretty seriously.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bedell.
Since we've closed the border in our areas, have we caught anyone dogging in them? Maybe that's a question for Randy. Protection.
We've had any cases in the last year, but we're certainly mindful of it, and we're patrolling those areas on a regular basis to follow up.
Have you gotten any assistance from the National Park Service? I know you have them listed. My understanding was they were kind of waiting for the Forest Service before they closed the Park Service.
That's correct, Commissioner. They provide assistance in helping with the trapping effort and that. They're on board with this, but they are in step with the Forest Service as far as closing to hunting, as far as closing their property to hunting.
So you can still dog in the national park?
Yes, sir.
So when you trap a group, do you get 100% of the group, or just, I think of I think I have an idea of what the cage looks like. I saw a picture, but do they all get in there before it shuts, or do you just get part of them?
It's variable, and the reason that trapping is the most successful way to eliminate them is because we can be successful at getting the whole group. But we have various styles of traps. The nicest and the most expensive has a live feed video to a cell phone. So if the guys know how many hogs are in the group, they can watch on their cell phone from anywhere on the planet, and they can wait until the entire group is under the trap and drop it. Others that are triggered by the hogs themselves, it varies. The older sows are going to be slower to come in than the piglets, but the guys get creative in how they set the corn in there, and they'll maybe put some corn under the trigger with a cedar branch over it. So the little ones that go in early are feeding elsewhere, and hopefully by the time they find that last little bit and trip the trigger, the whole group is in. One of the USDA guys actually caught 62 hogs in a trap, one night, and it was one that the hogs dropped the trap themselves. It wasn't one that he had control. So he did a very good job of hiding that trigger, I guess. But they're out there. The hogs are very smart, but our trappers are very smart as well. This is what they're doing all the time, and they get very good at it. And they're constantly adapting because the hogs are constantly adapting.
The roughly 3,300 that we've gotten rid of through March, that's without any helicopter work, right?
No, the USDA helicopter was here some
They're
in
the
January
only
and February. Yes,
Are they shooting?
yes, their helicopter is shooting, yes, sir.
How long does it take if you use the trap one time? Do they have to move it?
No, they can leave it in the same place. There seems to be varying opinions on that, but a lot of the staff think they can reset it in the same area and it's fine.
Because I'm curious, those things are very smart, and I'm just curious if they see their brother in that pen, whether or not they're taken off into the next county.
Well, that's definitely a concern, and that's why we hope to get the entire sounder the first time the trap springs, because otherwise they do get educated. And that's another bit of a concern. We were talking with some others yesterday about the 2018 Farm Bill and how they're going to distribute money, and that's a bit of concern if it just goes out to landowners without some education, because if you get folks that are untrained at trapping hogs and you have a bunch of people out there putting traps and they're putting them too close together and stuff, we may be educating the hogs rather than catching them, so we may be making our job more difficult if we don't, get it done correctly.
One thing you mentioned is trying to get the word out, is that you have 4 radio stations, I think, spots on 4 different stations. Where are those stations?
I think that's, campaign is in southeast Missouri, and then the From the Tailgate television one is in southwest Missouri, so we're trying to target all parts of the southern part of the state mainly. Then some of the stuff on the Brownfield network, I think, goes statewide. That's a radio campaign as well. I think Heather's shaking her head back there. I think that's a statewide campaign.
Do you have any openings for shooters out of helicopters?
We get a lot of volunteers for that.
I'm really, really cheap.
Yeah. I'll keep that in mind, Commissioner.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Alan, I just want to point out, as a soybean farmer, Gary Wheeler and his team just put this great article out about feral hogs in this last magazine, and really appreciate your outreach efforts in incorporating the ag industry and all our other partners. They have been critical in helping us in this, and just wanted to recognize them for some of the great coverage they've given us.
Great.
So,
Thank you, and thank the O&E staff as well. They're certainly a huge part of that.
O&E. Any other comments, questions?
Commissioner, just a final comment from me too, just a great appreciation to the Missouri Department of Agriculture as well.
Absolutely.
They've always been supportive, but in recent weeks and months have really stepped up their support for this effort, and so just wanted to give a shout out to them.
Super.
Thank you, Alan. Andrew, financial report. Get to hear from you again today.
Well, thank you. I have to follow bears and hogs. All I've got is numbers. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Commission, Director Pauly. It's my pleasure to present the next item on your agenda, the financial summary report for fiscal year 2019 through February. This report has been provided in your advanced materials. Please note that this report includes the mid-year adjustments that we made, that were presented at the February 8th Commission meeting. The mid-year did not adjust any revenue projections, but changes were made in expense, equipment, and construction to better reflect updated estimates. And I'll note that to our new commissioner. My report generally centers around the variances between last year's actual experience and the budget. So we'll start with revenues. I'll turn your attention to page 4 of the report. Total revenues for FY19 through February of 2019 were 1.8% higher than this time in fiscal year 18, and 1.4% below expectations. Conservation sales tax receipts were 2.3% above the same time period in fiscal year 18 and 0.6% below expectations. As of this morning, sales tax revenues for the state are up 2.62%, and we'll continue to monitor that as we get closer to the fiscal year end. Permit revenues were in line with last year and in line with expectations. The number of monetary and hunting fishing permits sold for FY19 through February were 55,500 fewer than the previous year. Commissioner Orslin had a question yesterday a little bit about the difference between hunting and fishing. I would say in our last briefing we talked about 1 million anglers and about 600,000 hunters, but the hunters buy a lot because of the way the seasons are set up. Hunters buy a lot more types of permits because of the seasons.
Sure.
So generally there's more revenue on the hunting side than the fishing side. Federal reimbursements were 0.8% lower than this time last year and 9.9% below expected levels. Other revenue sources combined were 9.5% above this point last fiscal year and 11.7% higher than anticipated. Most of the reason is the reimbursement of the out-of-state fire suppression that we received for this year. We put a lot more people on the ground, so the reimbursement check was higher than the previous year. Next, I'll turn your attention to expenditure trends, starting on page 5. Total operating expenditures were 2.1% below the same point in the previous fiscal year and 4.3% below expectations. Operating expenditures includes personal services, expense and equipment purchases. Personal service disbursements were 2.7% higher than the previous year and 3.2% lower than expected through February of 2019. Expenses were 10.8% lower than the same point in last fiscal year and 4.1% below expectations. Equipment disbursements were 2.7% higher compared to the first 7 months of 2018, or fiscal year 18, and 15.5% lower than expected. Total capital disbursements were 6.1% below this same time in the previous fiscal year and 51% below the budgeted amount. And again, this has to do a lot with the weather we've had and the inability to put some construction projects on the ground. Capital improvements includes land, conservation partnerships, and construction. Total disbursements for 2019 through February were 2.4% below the same period of time in fiscal year 18 and 10.2% below budget expectations. And this concludes my reports, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, questions, comments?
No questions. I think we went through yesterday.
We spent a great deal of time yesterday. Thank you, Andrew. Very thorough. Jacob, we have an action item.
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioners, Director Pauly, this is an action item for the Commission, follow-up to our discussion executive session about the details of this bid. It is authorization to enter into a contract with the Quality Roofing Company of Kansas City, Missouri for construction of the Gorman Conservation Discovery Center roof replacement project located in Jackson County at a total cost of $565,500. It is further requested that a contingency fund of $55,000 be authorized for unforeseen conditions and other changes necessary to complete the project. Total authorization requested is $622,500. Design Development Division recommends the bid as submitted by the low bidder be accepted.
Do we have a motion to approve? And a second?
Second.
Any discussion on this topic? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Yes, motion passes.
Thank you.
And we did want to point out, too, this is a 20-year-old roof, correct?
Yes, it is.
As we asked earlier.
Yes.
Thank you, Jacob. Jennifer, welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners, Director Polly, Ms. Maples. I have the next two agenda items, both of which are action items. Action item number 8 is a request for the Commission to approve the purchase of approximately 159 acres in Lewis County as an addition to our Deer Ridge Conservation Area.
So moved.
Discussion. Commissioner
Let the record
Murphy.
show that we did have extensive discussion on this.
Yes, sir.
I believe Commissioner Murphy might have a comment.
It's a treasure, beautiful property. It's a beautiful part of our state. My family's long been connected with a wonderful pristine river flows along one side of it. So, yeah, it is a real asset, and it's an in-holding on a great conservation area. The first community lake in Missouri.
Gives us a fantastic opportunity to do some bottomland forest restoration for.
Let me withdraw my motion and have Commissioner Murphy make a motion.
So moved.
And we have a second.
No, we're not going to second it.
It's going to die for lack of a
Are
second.
you kidding?
And we kind of already had the discussion, so all in favor?
I'm in favor.
Aye. Opposed? Anybody opposed? Thank you, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next action item is a recommendation for the Commission to approve the purchase of approximately 1,192 acres in Shannon County as an addition to our Rocky Creek Conservation Area. We did have quite a lot of discussion about this tract yesterday just because of the tremendous conservation value that this will add to the Rocky Creek Conservation Area.
Commissioners, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second it.
And we did have discussion quite a bit yesterday, so any further? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No. No, aye. I'm just playing with it.
So.
It wouldn't be a commission meeting if you
All in
didn't.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I do have
Motion
a
passes.
request, Deborah. I
Yes,
wish
sir.
you would email that video clip that you showed us.
The presentation, you'd like the PowerPoint
Yes.
presentation, I can certainly
Well,
do that.
Email that.
What a beautiful property.
it really was.
Amazing.
One of the best.
And I will give our natural history biologist in the Ozark region, Susan Farrington, all the credit for that. She really did a nice job putting that together for us.
Thank you for
Excellent.
providing.
Thank you, Commissioners, thank you.
Thank you. Tom, you have a few action items for us.
Madam Chair, thank you. My privilege to provide the next 4 items on your agenda. Item 10 is an action item. We are recommending the Commission's approval of 7 reclassifications, 5 in outreach and education, 1 in admin services, and 1 in resource science. Those recommendations were presented and discussed at yesterday's executive session. The approximate increase in personal services expenditures, including the impact to benefits, would be a total of about $25,000 ongoing. I'd be happy to address any questions you may have.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, we had discussion about this already, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 11 is an informational item only. It provides the Commission with a summary of the third quarter report of MDC personnel changes, of all personnel actions that were approved by the Director during that time period, including new hires, promotions, and transfers. As has been our past trend, new hires and promotions are typically staff with significantly less experience than the prior incumbents they're replacing. Thus, the items listed on the report reflect a reduction in ongoing personal services expenditures of approximately $89,000, including benefits. And again, on that one, I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? Do we have a motion to approve?
So move.
And second?
That's informational.
It's just,
Yeah, that's,
Ah,
no,
I'm sorry.
nope, it's okay.
I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here.
I'm here for your service, man. Item number 12, this one is the action item. We are recommending changes to the employee time records, compensatory time, and paid overtime human resources policy. This will allow for greater scheduling flexibility and decrease the amount of non-exempt compensatory time accrued for Protection Division. They've recommended moving all agents to a 28-day work schedule from their current 7-day workday schedule. Again, this does not apply in private industry or the businesses that all four of you are familiar with, but it does apply to law enforcement staff and in other lines of work for EMTs and first responders. The Fair Labor Standards Act, which is the federal law which governs overtime and payment of overtime, does not require compensation for employees on the 28-day work schedule when they work more than 160 hours, but less than 171 hours. However, we are recommending a change to policy to allow agents to accrue hour-for-hour compensatory time for hours worked from 160 hours up to 171 hours. And under the Fair Labor Standards Act, if an agent were to work more than 171 hours in that 28-day work period, again, as non-exempt staff, they would accrue time and a half compensatory time for that time worked. So if approved, that new hour-for-hour compensatory time for agents working those hours between 160 and 171 hours would have no cash value if an agent leaves the department, and the balances would be forfeited if not used before April 30th of each year. So in summary, these changes will provide additional scheduling flexibility that will reduce time and a half compensatory time accrual and ensures no additional expense to the department, so since we will be purging those compensatory time balances each year.
Do we have a motion to approve?
yes, I'll move.
And a second?
Second.
And we had discussion, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Madam
Thank
Chair. The last item on my list is item 13. I'm pleased to provide the Conservation Employees Benefits Plan Trust Fund report comparing 2017 and 2018 plan performance. And as the Commission will recall, our Conservation Employees Benefits Plan is on a calendar year, fiscal year, rather than the department's July through June fiscal year. But for 2018, our medical claims were down nearly 26%, or $3.3 million. This is primarily due to substantially deeper discounts. We're seeing on average more than 10% of a difference on those discounts on our medical claims, which has led to this, and that is due to our new contract with Blue Cross Blue Shield. It's given us even greater access to more providers, not only in Missouri, but throughout the country, as well as the deeper discounts that have led to the financial savings for the members of our plan. 2018 prescription claims were down about 2.5%, or about 155,000, due to price improvements through rebates, subsidies, and drug discounts through our pharmacy benefits manager, Express Scripts. So the deeper discounts and lower than projected major claims in 2018 resulted in approximately $3 million in net income to the plan for 2018, compared to approximately a $945,000 net loss in 2017. So this has resulted in the trust fund balance increasing from $8.4 million in December of 2017 to $11.4 million in December of 2018. So to say the plan had a very good year is an understatement. I think the measures that we've put in place with these new networks have had a tremendous impact on the plan, and we're very, very happy with the performance for 2018. So I'd be happy to answer any questions Commission may have.
Commissioners, comments, questions?
Very good job.
Thank you.
Yes. Excellent. This is practically unheard of in with health insurance. So applaud everybody's efforts on it. It's
Thank you.
exceptional.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Tom.
Thanks.
Aaron,
Good morning, Commissioners.
good morning.
Some absolutely incredible presentations up until this point. I will say, you look at our resource science folks, their knowledge, their passion for the outdoors. I mean, the bear research presentation, the waterfowl update, Alan's presentation on feral hogs. And if you look at all three of those topics, there's one common theme. It's partnerships. The department's successful because of the partnerships that we have with agricultural groups, landowners, other conservation groups to make that happen. And I think that's one of the things that makes Missouri unique and special is our ability to develop those partnerships. Currently, we are down to 5 weeks remaining in the legislative session, for those that are counting with me. That actually equals 20 legislative days that we still have to go over to the Capitol. First and foremost is the one constitutional responsibility for the General Assembly, and that's the passage of the budget. The Senate began markup this week. I do want to thank Andrew Bond and Director Pauly for coming over and helping out. We were successful in making some necessary changes on the Senate side. I expect the Senate will finish markup next week and then take the bills to the Senate floor the following week. Constitutionally, they have to be finished 1 week before the end of session, and I expect probably 3 weeks out, the Senate will take up the bills, and then that last week, they'll work them through conference. One of the things they're waiting on is for some of these tax returns to come in so that they can have a better estimate on revenue projections for the fiscal year. A couple bills that we are continuing to watch, a couple bills related to online sales tax, or streamlined sales tax. House Bill 548 was perfected in the House this week. That bill is a little convoluted. It's one that we worked on with the bill sponsor on. Right now, it's unconstitutional as it would require 2 constitutional taxes to revert that money that we would receive and Soil and Water and Parks would receive through online taxes, sale taxes, to general revenue. So I'm not too worried about that one in its current state. Senate Bill 46 was a good online sales tax bill. That seems to have stalled in the Senate, and it doesn't look like we're going to have the streamline or online sales tax solution that the state's been working on for several years. On Monday, I will be testifying on House Bill 655. This is a bill that we worked on with Representative Dinkins, Commissioner Orscheln. This is getting into fixing some of the problems with the current state statute related to feral hogs. It clearly defines who is a landowner agent. So if I was to rent your property to run cattle on, the state statute doesn't define landowner agent to where I could then go and shoot feral hogs on your property. What we're doing here is defining who that landowner agent is, and in this case, it allows a landowner or landowner's agent to basically use artificial light, spotlight. It doesn't allow them to use infrared or night vision, but allows them to use a spotlight to shoot feral hogs on their property. Unfortunately, House Bill 978, which was the prescribed insurance legislation that we worked on with the Nature Conservancy and also with the Insurance Coalition, that is yet to have been assigned to a committee. So I would declare that bill dead at this point with only 5 weeks remaining. That is something that Bill White has wanted for 30 years in his career. Unfortunately, we're not going to get that one across the finish line this year. I think, looking at the poaching bill, something that we've been working on for several years, you guys understand it takes a couple years to get a bill across the line. This is something we can take a second chance at next year. We have the language that the insurance companies like, that the conservation groups like, and so we should have a little bit more success next year with some education of legislators on the importance of that. House Joint Resolution 18, which would sunset the conservation sales tax every 6 years, introduced by Representative Moon from Lawrence County, was assigned to the House Conservation Natural Resources Committee 2 weeks ago. That is yet to have a hearing scheduled. So we will likely have a hearing on that before the end of the session. would expect a very large turnout from the conservation groups and others opposed to this legislation. On the poaching bill, Senate Bill 356, as you're aware, died in the Senate committee a couple weeks ago on a 3-3 vote. Fortunately, House was voted out of committee this week on a vote of 4-3. That bill is on the calendar now, and I would expect that could come up at any time. Given the fact that the Senate Ag Chair is the sponsor of Senate Bill 356, and the Senate Pro Tem was the previous sponsor of this bill, I expect that we'll probably get some floor time pretty soon. So I'll definitely keep you informed of any actions there. I understand and respect this is a high priority for us. This is something I will be working on with the Conservation Federation. Their lobbyist has been a tremendous help on this legislation as well. Just a couple other things on the fun side. Speaking of Senator Schatz, the Pro Tem, we're going to have a fish fry on Wednesday here in Jeff City for members of the Senate, and that's always been a good opportunity for Sarah and I and others to meet with senators. And then next Monday, or excuse me, not the opening day of turkey season, the second Monday, April 22nd, Bill White and other staff will be attending a tea party for the First Lady at the Governor's Mansion, where we're going to be talking about wildflowers, and the department purchased wildflowers for all the attendees. So should be a good time, a great way to probably build some new partnerships as well. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, questions, comments?
None.
Thank you.
Aaron.
Thanks, Aaron.
Director Pauly, any closing comments?
So I should have mentioned during my opening comments just a welcome to Justine Gardner as our new acting forestry chief, and so appreciate the fact that she's been willing to step up in this next 6-month term in that capacity. And a thank you to John Tuttle, who served the previous 6 months as Lisa Allen continues in her role as the president of the National Association of State Foresters. So welcome, Justine.
Well, this concludes our meeting. Thank you.
There you go.